Ki ngā manahuri I tēnei rā. Good morning everyone and welcome to our visitors today. It's good to see you all here. We'll get stuck in because we do, councillors, have our workshop this afternoon which involves having a good look at some of the library facilities plan, and we'll be taking a little walking tour on that one. So I have apologies from Councillor Yong and also for Dave McPherson for lateness. Will somebody please move that the Councillor Cass and Councillor Bunting, all in favour? Opposed? Carried. The agenda is as it is set out. Within the individual reports there might be a few minor changes, but the agenda stands. Someone move that the agenda be accepted, please. Councillor Casson, Councillor Henry, all in favour? Carried. Are there any declarations of interest, please? There being none, we will carry on and get into the public forum. We have 5 speakers that I'm aware of today, and I'm going to take them in the order that they just appear on my run sheet here, but I want to say thank you in advance for your attendance, and we look forward to what you have to share with us. And first up, if we could invite Colin Priest, who's going to, from the Hillcrest Bowling Club. Good morning, Colin. You're going to speak to item 9, which is the community occupancy application for Hillcrest Bowling Club. Thank you very much. Yes. So you get 3 minutes, and we'll give you a ding at 2.5 minutes just to allow you.
It could be about 30 seconds over, but I'll do my best.
I'm sure we won't be counting that precisely.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Council for the opportunity to speak to the Hillcrest Bowling Club lease application. My name is Colin Priest. I'm past president and here to speak on behalf of the Bowling Club. The Bowling Club was formed in 1950 and consists of 3 greens. The club has used our profile to raise a significant amount of money for local charities over the past 20+ years. Charities including Kidney Kids, Parkinson's Society, Blind Foundation, the St John's Ambulance, the Waikato Hospice, and most recently 2 years ago we raised $7,000 for the Te Whakaruhau Women's Refuge, and last year we got $7,000 plus for the Waikato Breast Cancer Trust. The facilities are used regularly for indoor bowls, karate club, business house bowls, public social events, computer gaming, and at the present moment we have a marching team interested in using the premises as well. New World Hillcrest, a sponsor of ours, has held seminars there along with the Kiwanis. They've used the club rooms for some of their meetings as well. We hold many major tournaments at Hillcrest, and we are known to have some of the best greens in the Waikato. National events including Maori Bowls, Disabled Bowls, the Blind Bowls, and we've also hosted chartered clubs, along with many Bowls Waikato events, and currently run open tournaments each season, which brings in bowlers from all over the North Island. Even teams from Norfolk Island and Australia have attended. This has had a financial spin-off to local food outlets and accommodation businesses. Hillcrest has produced New Zealand reps, national title winners, and are actually involved with Bowls Waikato in aspects such as players, coaches, selectors and board members. The club has various sponsors. Hillcrest High Sports Development NCEA program has been involved with us for the past 8 years. Over 200 students through the 6-week times 12 by 75-minute sessions, accumulating in an assessment of the ability each has gained. Not only a sports program, but teaches good skills into all facets of life. We also run a business house bowls tournament over an 8 to 10 week period, where approximately 20 to 24 teams participate. We have an 8-week program for disabled kids, where they have an hour and a half of fun and excitement, and followed up by a sausage sizzle. We note in the report number 19, page 31, that a declining membership. We feel that reducing membership in all sports is common, not just in bowls. Our club has survived through tough times, including a major financial setback, when we were defrauded of a large sum of money by our treasurer, and we were able to overcome that and other setbacks due to the fact that we have a very strong leadership and robust and determined executive and members who have faith in their leadership team, and the best greens in the Waikato, which are a pleasure to play on. These points, I believe, are critical to the successful running of a club, which is why we enjoy the success we have. And in finishing, I'd like to thank, on behalf of our club, to thank Karen Kwok from the council, who has done a most professional job in keeping us informed in our lease request. Well done, and thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions for clarification on this issue? Mayor King.
Thank you for your presentation. Are you you're comfortable and happy with what's on offer?
Yes, we are. We were quite aware that we were going to, this is going to happen eventually, and we applied for a 10-year lease, but it's been reduced to 5, and we're all aware that this could basically be on a 6-month notice if it turned to custard. Well, not in our favour, not in your favour, of course. But no, the club is quite happy. And in the aspect of us closing, it has been brought up in the last 2 general meetings, AGMs, that yes, the club would fold, etc. We hope it's not till 2030 by the sound of it. And we'll just follow whatever our constitution says about winding up. But no, we're quite happy and we're a strong club. We know what's going on.
Thank you.
Councillor Mallett. Okay, thank you. Any further questions? No? Thank you very much for coming in. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
We are just trying to see if we can get the sun out of your eyes, the poor speaker sitting there. Okay, our next speaker this morning is Margaret Evans, who is speaking to item number 8, which is the public art proposal from Toti. Good morning, Margaret and team. I'll let you introduce the key parts of your team. So if you introduce them, and we won't include that in your time, and then we'll...
Madam Chair Paula, Your Worship, Mayor Andrew and councillors and staff, may I begin by introducing Tim Elliott. Tim is the sculptor who is responsible for the Dame Hilda with the piano, and we thought it was appropriate, since we hope to get a tick from you today, that you would have the chance to talk with him directly, and I'll come back to that in a moment. You have an apology from our chair, Bill MacArthur, but we have Mavora Hamilton and Kate MacArthur with us today, and clearly you'll be able to ask them questions if you have any as well. The report, which is in your agenda, simply asks you to endorse the choice of the Dame Hilda sculpture. You will see that we've had a wonderfully robust opportunity for all sorts of people to comment, and that is the clear favourite. I want to refer you to, in our report, the page 25, where the fifth paragraph down, our art advisor, Hamish Keith, describes the concept as quirky and funky, and a piece that's grown on him. But I particularly want you to look at his response, that he felt it would energise the site rather than just slide into it. That's terribly important, because this is not just a standalone sculpture. This is going to be part of a plaza. And we've talked with a number of the property owners and shopkeepers in the area, and they all feel that a makeover for this park is really important. We are very happy to work through with staff and with you on how that might evolve, but I think it's important to see this as an overall piece. Now, Tim just happened at the same time that we chose him to win the People's Choice Award in the number 8 wire for the Field Days competition, so we thought that was kind of an omen. So, here he is. We think it's a lovely piece. It's going to be a challenge. This is not an easy piece. The weight of it alone is going to require some interesting foundations. He's being quite challenged in terms of putting it together, but I'll let him speak for himself. Tim.
Good morning. I'm honoured to be here. Thank you. It's a pleasure to contribute to this meeting and to Hamilton in general. I'm really not quite sure what you'd like me to say. I think I've tried to capture Dame Hilda's spirit in a cheerful and delightful way, and really I see that as my job. And really I'm not sure if there's much else I can add to that, but I'm very happy to take questions.
So thank you very much, and congratulations for the win in the number 8 wire. That's amazing. I did see it. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time to contribute to this important city project. Are there any questions, councillors? It does come up in an item later, so we will have full discussion at that time. Okay. No. Oh, sorry. It didn't show up there. Councillor Pascoe, then. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The word quirkiness, does that in art terms mean controversial? Because we have a history in Hamilton of controversial art pieces, which many Hamiltonians liked, but which became the targets for different types of vandalism because people didn't like the art or because they thought the art was controversial.
I really don't think quirky has a definition which is negative in that respect. I don't think it makes it a target for vandalism or anything. I think quirky in art terms is just a curiosity. It creates a curiosity, a sense of interest that people respond to. I don't think they'll respond to vandalism. I see no reason why they would do that. I've worked on quite a large number of public art projects, either as the lead on the project or an associate or a collaborator. And some of those quirky projects, frankly, have never seen any vandalism. There's a project, one of the ladies that I collaborate with a lot in Auckland, she's done a huge quirky mural covering up an eyesore of a piece of transport infrastructure with bridges and walls. They've decorated butterflies all over this. It's next to a butterfly garden. Not one incident of tagging since then, because I think the people that vandalise things are actually artists. The people look at them and they go, "Oh my God, these people are just heathens, brutes." They go around vandalising everything, but at the end of the day, they are artists. Banksy in the UK is a very, very famous tagger. He's very much considered as an artist. No one would dare vandalise his work, so I don't think we're going to see it. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mallett.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on what I think is a very exciting sense of life sort of thing. It's actually people, and it's actually it's quite clear what's there instead of some of the stuff we get. But my question is also just the fingers and that sort of stuff. Are they reasonably strong?
They're going to be solid. The fingers will be solid. Now, they will be reasonably strong. Yes. I mean, don't forget.
I appreciate you can't prevent everything, and you can't protect against everything.
You can't. Bronze is a very, very tough material. It's a very, very tough material. We don't intend doing anything on here less than 5 millimetres thick. I think we need to remember that cannons are made out of bronze. So if they can withstand
we went through a Bronze Age too, didn't we? Yeah.
We did.
That was a good one.
Were you there,
and I take my hat off to them, our ancestors, for doing that.
All right, no, that's great. Thank you very much. I think it looks fantastic.
Councillor McPherson.
A very quirky looking, interactive looking piece actually. Does it work? Does the piano work? It makes you want to sit down and have a shot.
No, it doesn't work. And in fact, the keys are actually unlikely to be black and white at the end of the day. They're more likely to be just straight bronze. We can patina them in different ways to make them, to give them more of an impact of black and white keys. But that's some artistic license in how we express ourselves so that people get it, that it's a piano in a photograph is quite different to people getting it that it's a piano when you can walk around it. It's very obvious when you walk around it, but when you're sharing photographs for the first time, you kind of use a few extra tools to create the impact of what it is. It's a communication tool.
But you need to be warned. It has been suggested to us that since there are a number of wonderful sound recordings of Dame Hilda, it would be kind of nice to have a button that you could push.
Yes.
That included some of her speech making and maybe a bit of honky tonk piano.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor, Deputy Mayor Gallagher.
I'll try and make this a question.
Please do.
It is noted that Toti is pursuing a history of Hamilton, and will you be inspired by such productions as One Hell of a Fight in terms of rolling out other major characters and people who have contributed so much to history, given the theme of Sappermore Jones and Hilda Ross? I mean, obviously, just your work is fantastic. That's kind of a question.
Martin, if you're asking, are we going to do a book? Probably.
Yeah.
And can I tell you, as we've been on this pathway, it's amazing the new anecdotes that people are bringing to us. Just last week, Mavora and I were out with the Flagstaff Probus Club, and a former nurse told us there how when she was a cabinet minister, Hilda still used to regularly visit up at the hospital, and she recalls with great fun, she always used to check out the kitchens up there, and any crockery that had any cracks in it, remember she's a cabinet minister, any crockery she used to just smash and put in the rubbish bin.
Well, that's good, and I think Tim and David, the two local ministers, we might give them that advice, and we'd welcome the
smash
DHB.
the crockery.
I can imagine they have a new visit to the DHB kitchens.
Thank you, Councillor Ziggy.
I have to add something to it. I love the idea of that it integrates, it will include people, real people as well, to be able to sit there on the chairs and everything around. I love that. But I just want to ask, because you said you need some special foundation, how heavy do you think it's going to be? Sorry.
I haven't got the final weight for you yet, but I can tell you alone that the piano alone is 250 kilograms.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I'm estimating that it's going to be underneath one ton of bronze metal in there, but not over that.
Okay, thank you.
So one of the issues with the seat is that I'm going to need to pay some special attention to that in order to make sure, because the seat is actually integral to the sculpture.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the seat's got to be able to support the weight. So that's an area where I've got to pay some attention.
That's great. Thank you. It's lovely.
Councillor Casson.
Yeah, thank you, Margaret. I haven't got a question, I've got an apology actually. So, because when the concept first came to light here, I said it was quite boring, and I'd rather see Dr. Frankenfurter there instead of Hilda Ross. But hey, great concept there, Tim, and wish you well on it. It's all good. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming and speaking to it. Thank you. Hamilton's always very much better off for creativity that comes to us, so that's excellent. Thank you. Our next speaker is Bruce Clarkson. Is he here? Oh, good morning, Bruce. And Bruce is speaking to item 10, which is the Hamilton Zoo Master Plan.
Kia ora tātou. Madam Chair, Your Worship, elected members, thank you for the opportunity to comment on the Zoo Master Plan. I'm Bruce Clarkson. I'm in the Environmental Research Institute at the University of Waikato, and I'm also the chair of the Waiwhakariki Advisory Group. I was part of the advisory group that was put together in development of the master plan, and that was ably chaired by Councillor O'Leary. It was a very valuable process. I was impressed with the process and the way that the information was collated, the analysis that was done, and the way that that informed the development of the master plan. I was struck by the international consultants involved in that project and the way that they viewed the opportunity for a coordinated, integrated approach to a zoo and a natural heritage park. And they said that they thought that this was potentially a world-leading approach. So complementary development is both operationally logical and financially efficient. And I think that providing this double feature, having the zoo and having Waiwhakariki Natural Heritage Park side by side, will be an increasingly valuable component of Hamilton's City of the Future portfolio of community assets and visitor attractions. And the combined approach should increase visitation rates of both features. The educational opportunities too are complementary, and I think they will continue to be attractive to external funding agencies which provide contestable funding, which we've been able to access to help keep these projects going. So in short, we strongly support option 2, approve the Zoo Master Plan, because that will provide the platform for further discussion in the long term, the 10-year plan. And as always, we are willing to support the zoo and the great conservation work that they do under the insightful leadership of Stephen Stanley. There are also ways that we can work together, as we have done, in jointly funding, for example, jointly funding summer student scholarships or internships, and to align our research where it's relevant to the zoo's operation. So, to reiterate, option 2, approve the Zoo Master Plan. Thank you for the opportunity to provide our views today. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time. Are there any questions? There is an item coming up. Any questions at this point in time? No? No? Thank you very much. Thanks, Bruce. Next on our list this morning we have Graham Pollard, who's Friends of the Hamilton Zoo, and he's also speaking to the Master Plan, Zoo Master Plan. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to address the committee. Besides me is Anne Wilkins, President of Friends of the Zoo. I'm Graham Pollard. I'm a member of Friends of the Zoo. I'm also a former director of the North of England Zoological Society, which owns and manages Chester Zoo. The Friends of Hamilton Zoo fully support the Hamilton Zoo Master Plan. The innovations within it are vital additions to the zoo aimed at attracting and exciting more visitors, including as well more business and corporate groups looking for new events and functions, opportunities to meet, greet and impress prospective partners and clients. Put briefly, a great zoo is great for business development wherever Hamilton companies seek new business. The new entranceway proposed, while not supporting animal conservation directly, is an essential part of the zoo experience. First impressions are as vital in a zoo as they are in any other business. When we did the same in Chester Zoo, it made the transition from the car park to the start of the animal experience so much more effortless and quick that it got everyone's and a great visit is what we want our visitors to have from wherever they come. We want to enthuse visitors of all ages about the animals, the problems their wild relatives face. We want to harness that enthusiasm for conservation and community benefits, both in New Zealand and internationally. Now, we realise that implementing the Zoo Master Plan is going to cost money. But don't forget that that money does not necessarily have to come from the rates and fees and charges. Friends of Hamilton Zoo stands ready to continue in partnership with Hamilton City Council to help raise the funds through grant applications, promoting business links, or whatever it takes to put Hamilton Zoo on a par with Hamilton Gardens. We're currently only small, but with council support, we are confident that we can quickly return to being an organisation of size and strength within the community. The fundraising that has been done by the Friends of Hamilton Gardens has been excellent and very rewarding. Now, with your support, it's the turn of Hamilton Zoo. The Friends of Hamilton Zoo want Hamilton to have not just an internationally renowned botanical gardens, but also an internationally acknowledged zoological gardens of excellence. So please help us to help you to make Hamilton Zoo the first-class facility that this city deserves. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Mallett.
Thank you very much. Is there a zoo in New Zealand that reaches the level at which you're talking or foreseeing?
In terms of...
All the stuff, all the good things you're talking about.
What I've
in terms of community development, community growth, prosperity, you linked it to business somehow. I'm not quite sure how you were linking it to business in your discussion.
In terms of linking with business, there's always the prospect of bringing business in. And just referring back to Chester Zoo.
So you mean bringing business in as a funder, or
as funding, but also using the zoo as a way of getting to new clients. Just as an example, Ford Motor Cars wanted to get into China. They used Chester Zoo as a way of doing that by funding a Jaguar exhibit. But by using that, they were able to leverage links with Chinese business and government as well, and to get into China that way. So there are all kinds of ways that businesses can use the zoo. Also, when you've got something like a bush camp and glamping, it's a way of wining and dining, or in this case, glamping with your prospective clients.
So we already have hotels and motels and sporting venues and things like that.
Yes, but this then provides something different.
Right.
And very often, of course, people have been through the sporting venues and so on and so forth. So the opportunity of the zoo provides a new opportunity. Something that a little bit different.
Sadly, most of our sporting and events centres run at massive, massive losses.
Okay, keep to the questions, please, Councillor Mallett.
Yeah, so what do you foresee doing this sort of running the zoo in the same sort of reason? We're constantly told that the reason we have these facilities is because they bring great benefit to the community, but of course they bring great losses to the city council, which is the ratepayers. What do you foresee the same thing happening with the zoo?
I perceive the business links as an opportunity for businesses to use the zoo as a function centre. How that then fits in with the business plans for the zoo is a matter for council and the zoo team. But certainly in my experiences, business do like to use something like the zoo as a function centre of difference, and a different venue for hosting their meetings, their social events with prospective clients.
So are there other zoos in New Zealand that are doing this?
I'm not quite in a position to answer that, but I would suspect that Auckland is very much doing that.
Do you know, or are you just guessing?
I'm just guessing off the top of my head right now.
Okay, so
no doubt I could go home and find something.
Okay, so I think Grant indicated he can't answer at the moment. So that's
Thank
fine.
you.
That's
my
fine.
point
Thank
today was please support us to help you.
Thank you. Councillor Henry.
Thank you so much, Graham. Look, just one question. If we don't do anything about it, where do you think the zoo would go if we do nothing? What future would the zoo have?
People would eventually become tired, I think, of just seeing the same thing all the time. Things that really get people interested in coming back to the zoo, to zoos again and again, are new animals, either being brought in from other zoos or baby animals, even better. New developments as well. Those are the kind of things trying to keep it fresh. Otherwise, it's just more of the same, and eventually people will go to new places that offer something different.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Gallagher.
are the Friends of the Zoo and Professor Clarkson aware that most councillors are deeply grateful for all your wonderful work in this area? I'm only allowed to ask a question.
Okay, so thank you for that question. I'm pretty certain that was a rhetorical question. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you for your work you're doing. It's fantastic. Thank you. With an upward inflection, so that's a question too. I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited about your activity. So you are suggesting you'll have to get to the level that the Very Active Gardens group have got to really crank this up?
I think if we can do that, then we've got a really good chance of creating the excellent facility that we ought to have.
Right.
As I say, we've got an excellent, effectively, botanical gardens. We've got the potential to have a really, really excellent zoological garden standing alongside. And if you really wanted to go for a triumvirate, then there's a rather good arboretum as well. So you could have 3 really good biological facilities around Hamilton.
Right. Okay, cool. That's all for me.
Not that that's the focus of us, with Hamilton Zoo, of course.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Thanks for the work you do, and thanks for coming today. I was interested in you referred to opportunities for business, I think you did, for business sponsorships too. And it seems to me that if this is to progress, there's going to need to be significant partnerships with the community and business because of the financial situation we're in. With Chester Zoo, did businesses sponsor that? You know, was there a partnership with business there? And what opportunities have you had interest from business?
Yeah.
We've not gone down that road of trying to find the business interest at this stage. As far as Chester's is concerned, we had sponsorship from various companies. The Ford Motor Cars one, because they had the Jaguar mark, were obviously very keen in providing something like $8 million equivalent of sponsorship for a new Jaguar facility, which of course they were looking at the business spin-offs of that sponsorship. So that was a major breeding unit, and of course Chester Zoo is run by a charity itself. It's not local authority, so there's more opportunity to bring that business interest in terms of sponsorship. But certainly the function centres that we had, the conference facilities and so on, were well used by business. And certainly when we had the pleasure of opening new facilities and celebrities and so on involved in that, people really want to get involved in supporting this kind of work.
Okay.
Yes, Hamilton and New Zealand are smaller than Chester Zoo, because Chester Zoo's catchment within 2 hours of the zoo is more than the population of New Zealand. Admittedly, there's a difference in scale, but if we can take the learnings from places like Britain and the US and trying to do what we can along those lines here in New Zealand, I'm sure we can take this zoo forward.
Thank you.
You want one further short question from Councillor Bunting?
Thank you for your indulgence. One thing we haven't talked about is the zoo's position in the conservation movement in the world. If the zoo was to topple, what work wouldn't we be able to do for, I'm thinking, for example, of the preservation of the rhinos and some of the primates, etc.?
I'm not possibly in the ideal position to answer that, but obviously in those circumstances all the animals need to find new homes. Certainly for the New Zealand species, then discussions will have to be had with the likes of Department of Conservation. They would all need to go to different units. There would obviously be discussions around Australasia and any other places as to what happens to the rest of the animals. But there's a sizable cost involved in actually shutting the thing down as well, which of course we don't want to happen. There is so much potential for regional and I think potentially, depending on how the zoo develops over the years, with international tourism as well as conservation. And of course, there's education. We can link in so well with the primary, the intermediate, the high schools and the universities as well. At Chester, I was the advocate for education and started the education committee there. It is a massive opportunity to engage young people with the natural world and with animals other than cats and dogs, and also some of the issues that are happening around the world.
Okay, so I think
conservation isn't just about animals, it's about people in those countries as well.
Thank you.
No disrespect to cut the questions off, but we've got the item coming up too, and there may be some staff available to answer some of those questions at that time as well. Can I reiterate vote of thanks for Council for the Friends of the Zoo? Not only do we have awesome staff, awesome passionate staff out there at the zoo, we also know that the zoo wouldn't be half the success it is without the volunteers and the Friends of the Zoo there supporting it. So thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to come in today.
Thank you.
Those of us who went to One Hell of a Fight may not recognise that Graham played Councillor Lafferty with his fantastic Irish accent, so I just wanted to mention that.
Please give Frankton a fair go.
Yeah. And you'd like to add the zoo to that list now, wouldn't you?
And actually we're bringing One Hell of a Fight back at the meteor from the 11th to the 19th of August. Due to popular demand, we're having a second season.
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much for that, Mayor O'Leary. It was actually councillors who haven't been must go. It's a must see, and just put an unashamed plug out there into the public that it is worth seeing, and homegrown, good talent, great story. Thank you. Yeah, it was good. Slick.
Here at the moment.
Oh, okay, we better move on because we do have one further speaker that I'm aware of who would like to speak to us on item 11, which is pertaining to the river plan, and that's Mr. Bindon, Murray Bindon. Thank you. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, councillors. Thank you for this opportunity. Can I say also well done, Emirates Team New Zealand.
Yes.
I think that's just a fantastic result. Helen Jarman beside me and myself are two of the 6 owners of the apartments at 240 Victoria Street. Our northern boundary, our wall in fact, of Helen's apartment is about 20 metres, 25 maybe, from the south side of Victoria on the river. And Unit 6 wall is on the Embassy Park. A lot of people call it Riff Raff Park, I think, but you know what I mean. There's a proposal, we understand, to put another path on the riverbank immediately below our apartments. It horrifies us. I've got to immediately make an apology to 2 or 3 of you that I spoke to, because I honestly believed that there was absolutely no reference to that in LIM reports. In fact, there is a very fine print in one of the 28 pages on a map that says proposed promenade. And I think every one of the 6 of us, or those of the 6 that got LIM reports, missed that. It was supposed to carry down on the title. It was a condition of the building consent given to Konek Developments, Catley Leather and Goodwin about 20 years ago. But by an oversight, it wasn't put on their title and therefore didn't carry down onto our titles. And so, unfortunately, and we must share blame for it, I believe, we didn't know when we bought that path might be built. Nearly 20 years has passed, but it's now proposed. Our concern, obviously, it's a personal interest. We're in an area, and we accept in the central city, living there, that you expect some detractions from your pleasure of living. We have people sleeping under the apartments. I think we've blocked that off with a fence myself and my boys built. I had one occasion a fire was lit 1.5 metres below the floor of my apartment. We understand that one of the desires for there to be this path is wheelchair access. We feel that could easily be achieved by a ramp from Victoria on the river down to the existing river path, which has a flat or very low gradient rising up to the museum and ferry bank, etc. If there is to be a path built, we would like consultation with us. We do have serious security issues. People might climb off the path and come up to our apartments. We'd like some screening. We would like trees felled. We used to have a view of the river. Largely that's blocked out now by the height of the trees that have grown along the riverbank, notwithstanding my protestations to Bill Featherston over the years. So that's the issue. The path is unsuitable for walking at certain times of the day because of the cyclist. It's dangerous. My wife, for example, simply refuses to walk there because she's been nearly run over several times. It should be like the lake with cyclists banned from the walk, and then wheelchairs and pedestrians might use it more. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. Mayor Andrew.
Will you be able to see from the walkway into your apartments?
No, Mr. Mayor, they'd be below the level of the apartments. The biggest concern would be noise, especially when the bars close 3 o'clock in the morning. We get a little now, but it's right down on the riverbank. It's not right under our bedrooms. But the answer is no, you wouldn't be able to see it.
Could we ask our general manager in charge? He's not here. Sorry, Lance. Hiding. Could we ask one of your staff who's working on this to consult with somebody from these flats, with the one appointed person, so it doesn't get messy, as to what they would like to see, because this hasn't started yet, and so that we can work in with them where we get an outcome for the city, but also an outcome for the flats where they're comfortable with where we're heading.
Yeah, so that's going to come up in the discussion later on of the item, and that was the intention that Gina would work with all landowners in that particular area to hear people's views, hear their issues, their concerns, and what the opportunities are to work through to a compromise situation.
Does that satisfy where you'd
yes,
like to go without prejudice? I mean, we can't guarantee the outcome, but...
No, of course not. No, we had a very helpful meeting with two ladies from the council last week, Helen Jarman and I. The first thing we'd like to see, of course, is a plan. Exactly where on the bank below the apartments it's placed is important to us. If it's sufficiently below the wall of the apartment with vegetation screening between the walkway and the apartments, that would be a help. But at the moment, all we know it's proposed. We don't know exactly where, and that would be helpful, and then we can work from there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm hearing from you, I think, is that while you'd prefer for it not to be a walkway there, for the reasons you stated earlier, there may be some ways that council can mitigate the effects of that walkway should it go ahead.
Yes, that is true. I think our major premise, though, Madam Chair, is that it's just unnecessary. The existing path is about 25 metres below or less below our apartments, which would be less than 25 metres below where the proposed walkway is to go. And it's a very steep bank. It would be a minimum of 45 degrees. It's unstable, it's sand, and it would come at a huge cost to ratepayers, and we just don't see the point when there's a river path right below it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gallagher.
Just when you bought your properties, and I'm interested now in the tree and the view shafts. When you first bought your property, how did your view shaft compare with now? Because obviously
we had total views from both levels of the apartment. Now we've got glimpses of the river between the trees from the upper level, and almost no view whatsoever from the lower level. Do you know the name of the trees that are along the bank there?
A nuisance.
Helen says the name of the trees is nuisance. I'm not sure, but many of them are the same, and they've grown very high and very bushy. I probably illegally thought one day that I could top one of them, and when I got down on the river path, I found that the first branches were about 30 feet above me, 10 metres above me. And there was no way I was going up there to top it. So the actual vegetation was way above that. So no, the view is, in time, it will be totally obscured. And of course, it was a major reason for buying there.
I mean, given your reputation and the respect in the community, probably would be unhelpful to your particular profile in the community, Mr. Bindon, should you do that. But I just want to say that, are you aware that we do have a vegetation management plan? And I'll just say to Lance, as part of the discussion, I think that would be a dialogue that could be entered into, because the intent of the vegetation management plan is to re-establish some of those view shafts. So we've got a trade-off with stability of bank, of greenery, but trying to re-establish in this prime river area decent view shafts as well. And it seems to me through the GM that that's also a discussion when we're talking about the pathway that could be also had at the same time. Because it seems to me that I think there are some issues with Novotel, with our hotels all along there.
Sure.
We're getting similar feedback, and we do recognise there are protected trees, but we recognise there are other trees where some vegetation management might assist in re-establishing some of the view shafts.
Yes, correct. There's been, well, I've lived beside the river for all but 5 of my 70-something years. So I know it pretty well. There's been lots of collapses of the bank, as you will know, vast cost to the council to repair. There's been lots of trees that have fallen down. It's an unstable bank. It's all sand.
Yes.
And there's springs there, etc., etc. So yeah, that vegetation management seems to be taking place at the moment. I hear the chainsaws going, and I've been tempted to say, how about these ones here as well? But I've kept away.
Thank you.
I didn't hear that.
Councillor Mallet. Okay, so thank you very much for coming in, and you know, you're welcome if you have the time to listen into the discussions later around that topic. And if not, the staff will be reporting to you and working with you as soon after as possible. Thank you again. Thank you to
Madam
everyone
Chair.
who has come in this morning.
Do you have any idea around the time that that discussion might take place?
We're hoping to get this whole meeting done and dusted by lunchtime. Do you have any idea? There's a few ordinary reports to go through, which I think we can get through quite quickly. And unfortunately, we can't move it because we have people from the other agenda items equally interested in staying on. But what we'll do is try to crack on as much as we can.
Thank you. I think we both have other meetings a bit later this morning, so I don't think we can stay, but thank you.
Yeah, it is probably likely to be closer towards the lunchtime anyway. So if you get a chance to pop back, touch base with the staff and they'll be able to tell you if we've had that item. If not, we will be in touch with the outcome. Thank you. Okay, thank you, councillors. Now we'll go to item 5, which is the Community and Services open minutes from the previous meeting. Are there any questions? We'll take it as read, although I was going to ask for just maybe 2 comments of update. One will actually probably come up a little bit later and around the Rotatuna Indoor Recreational Trust, because there's been a bit of movement and some things to report on, and I guess you'll pick that up in your report, Lance. Yeah. So we'll catch you up on how that has progressed around the opening. The only other one that I thought might be worthy of a quick comment is the Hamilton City Safety Plan Review. If Councillor O'Leary would just like to say anything to that, otherwise we'll just take it as read. It's progressing quite nicely, and yeah, we've had 1 meeting, so it's on course. Okay, thank you, councillors. Any other matters in the open minutes? Oh, Councillor McPherson. No, not yet. Coming soon. All right, so can someone...
One question which might be helpful for next time is during that submission, I know there is a path. I've heard of a path through Whispers, but I haven't ever seen it. And I was wondering if it's possible to get the information a little bit earlier so we could ask more relevant questions on that. I just felt a wee bit ill-informed in that.
Yes, it is coming to the item,
it is,
and we only had that meeting to sign off the report yesterday. So it was really, with all the various working parties that we got going, it was just one of those time frames. But yes, no, I take your point, and we usually endeavour to get it out at least the night before. But okay, so thank you. Somebody please move that the minutes. Councillor Casson, seconder please. Councillor Bunting, all in favour? Opposed? Carried. That brings me on to item 6, which is in fact my Chair's report, which I'm largely going to take as read. It's pretty self-explanatory really, and in my view, some of the things that we're doing around the LTP will bring this to a focus anyway. Any questions about my report? Councillor I've got Councillor Mallett first and then Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. Halfway through, you talk about inviting Susan Devoy to the give us a discussion on human rights and race relations. That you're not considering that in a formal meeting, were you? Or that would be much better in a workshop, I would have thought.
Well, I'm comfortable about either or. Tauranga City Council.
How does it kind of fit in with?
Well, we had some conversation about the role that local government plays in supporting the work of the Human Rights Commission, and I understand that Tauranga had a presentation from her which they really valued, and as Chair of the Community and Services, putting the word community at the very front of that, I thought it would be very useful for us to be alert to our responsibilities in a community sense over those matters. That's how that came about.
I just don't see it's within our jurisdiction. So, but just to be clear, you're suggesting that would come to a meeting or to a workshop?
I haven't worked out the details. It probably come to a briefing. It's an opportunity to. She's a very engaging speaker, lots of experience with most councils around the country. It would be just a chance for us to engage with her about the way that we incorporate human rights and race relations into our everyday work.
Does that come with a cost?
I wouldn't think it would come with very much because she's already paid in the Human Rights Commission to come over from Tauranga. Maybe there'll be travel, but I wouldn't expect there to be because she's a government appointee. There's not normally for those things. So anyway, I would find her input valuable, and some other councillors may, and others may not. So we'll move on from that one. Councillor McPherson.
Yes, thanks. Just a comment and question relating to your consultation with strategic stakeholders 1 and 2, the groups you mentioned there. I'm wondering why the regular community forums that our community staff organise, there's about 6 community networks and plus a youth network, aren't sort of involved in your list here, because I note that SEAL is basically it's an outside organisation that's established something here, but it's only one, whereas those other networks have collections of lots of people from lots of organisations that have been going for a long time and with much better connections, in my opinion.
100% agree with you. This is just a starting point. We are doing some collective thinking about community engagement and how we can improve that and get a broader horses for courses type of engagement with our community. Just so happened that these were the 2 that I most recently had conversations with, and you can't do everything at once, you've got to start somewhere. Zeal are really interested in the idea of having us in their place, seeing how we operate, and participating in that. Tauranga just came up because the Chair of Community and Services over there came over on a Sunday to visit with me to understand how we do our committee here and how he does. And he believed there was value in cross-boundary conversations, and I don't disagree with him, and I'm very open to that. So, I mean, if this council doesn't want to do that, we won't progress it, but we have got the offer for us to go and see what they're doing in the community and services area and what they're investing into, what their learnings are in Tauranga, with the view that maybe a bit later we would reciprocate and host them here.
I think those are excellent ideas, but I'm
just a bit concerned that we're not taking up the offers that have been put to us by our own, via our own staff from the different community networks that already exist, and I think they'd be valuable to use, you know. Yeah.
That's fair enough, and Lance and I have been having a talk about how we do that better and how we get better not only attendance at those things, but representation between us at those events.
Yeah.
And just one other thing is reporting back on the community network meetings back to here. I've just been discussing with Councillor Paula just about probably a quarterly report to come back on some of the trends that are coming through, some of the information, that sort of thing. But I think the idea of actually having the personal interactions probably going to be quite useful too.
Thanks.
And we're just tidying up a few loose ends around that too, in terms of how councillors get to know what's on and when it's on, because sometimes it's informally invitation, sometimes it's formal invitation, and that way things do fall through the cracks. They have for me and others as well. So, Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you. And Susan Devoy is a very regular visitor to this city, and a number of us were at a function with her organised by the Waikato Muslim woman to acknowledge Ramadan. But I think it would be very personally useful for Dame Susan. It's very good to have some external visitor who can tell us from her perception and feedback what we are doing well, because we're doing a whole lot of stuff really well in my view, and what we can improve on and that kind of thing. So I'm really interested in the fact that she's done a similar exercise in Tauranga. Also, I think Councillor Bell, former Councillor Bell, and myself visited Tauranga when we had a community development committee, and I think one of the things that came out of that particular visit, which Lance will attest to and staff, was that shared facility model where Tauranga is doing really good work in terms of, you know, working with secondary schools in terms of shared recreation facilities. Now, again, the model of that we're seeing obviously in terms of the report with Rotatuna. So I think that personally is really good, and I'd strongly personally encourage that. Perhaps I was going to raise the issue of community engagement in the next item, but could I just also, perhaps if I may, through this to the GM, I think we do need to reinstate those quarterly reports to the network meetings. I think that's very, very important. Totally agree with Dave on that. The actual review of community development section, and as that relates to you know, the works around the social well-beings, but some of us, for example, have had concerns as to whether or not the current physical location of the unit in Duke Street is the most effective location, and I'm just perhaps, could you perhaps just give us a general update of broadly speaking where the review is at?
Yeah, so just on that, there's a couple of things. Just we want to put it into a bit of a chronological order. Yeah. So in the next few weeks, councillors have got a number of briefings around the LTP, and we're going to go through each business area of council. It's called the business we're in, and there'll be a discussion around the activities and the levels of service. So community development will be part of that, and elected members' views on the level of service. There'll be a discussion around that. We'll talk about what's actually happening at the moment, and then we'll get the feedback from councillors on the level of service. Then how it's delivered, and some of that things that you've mentioned, Councillor Geller. Then out the back end of that, once there's we start getting a bit clearer on the general direction around the level of service, then we'll be going into just looking at how Andy's team operate, and you're pretty aware of the Section 17A reviews that we did over the last 12 months on, so level of service review is what we do and how much of it we do, and then the Section 17A is then how we do it. So I think that's the second part to that, and we'll look at moving through that over the next 2 to 3 months. And we'll include elected members in that. I've already had some feedback from a few around that. And obviously we'll need to talk to stakeholders, we'll need to talk to interested parties, and obviously keep the staff involved in that process too.
I think that process, because you know, when we first had the new trainem and we met and did the tour and that, it's a really great opportunity. I'd like to see the opportunity of meeting the excellent people in each, you know, section. You'd had that when we had the Operation Activity Committee of the whole committee in a previous term, but I just think through the LTP, Madam Chair, that gives us a really good opportunity to interact, you know, with our unit managers and the team in the field, and particularly community development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that feedback. And just note that I do make a comment about our ageing facilities at the bottom, which I have said before, and I just note I do feel quite strongly that we must keep our eye on that, how we're going to deal with the facilities that we already have that need some care and attention. And that's going to be a very important conversation for me in the LTP. So that's why I slipped that one in there. Thank you very much. Somebody please move that thank you, Councillor Taylor. Seconder, please. Anybody? Councillor Henry. All in favour? Opposed? Carried. That brings us on to the next item, which is the General Manager's report, after which we'll take a short break and then go on to the other ones. It'll be a very short break.
Thanks, Chair Paula. I know you need a short break. I'm starting to smell the Chief Executive's cheese scone from here. So.
Yeah, so can.
Just on my report, councillors, I'm going to defer tabling the social wellbeing indicator report that I had here. And the reason being, I just want to check a few bits of information in there just before that becomes more public. So we'll report that back at the next committee meeting. I've had a bit of feedback on a few bits and pieces, and the other thing is I know some elected members just wanted to have a bit of discussion around that. So the briefing schedule's quite busy the next couple of months, but I think it'd probably be quite useful to bring the draft to a briefing so we can have a discussion on that, and then we can actually table it publicly. So I'll defer that part of my report, so apologies for that. I don't think there's any big hurry for it, so I think we'll be in a good space so we can actually do that and make sure that you can actually have a good look at that and have a good discussion around that before we go out with that report. The second part of mine is just around the Rototuna Indoor Recreation Centre. I gave a bit of an update at the last committee meeting. I think the team's going to put some pictures up. Just thought I'd give you a bit of an update, if I can drive this. So since the last committee meeting, things have progressed. The centre has moved on. So the exterior of the building, I'll show you a few shots, and I'll talk a little bit more about the mechanics of the trust and the operations of the facility. So that's the building exterior as it is as of yesterday, and you can see there's actually some outdoor courts to the left-hand side of it too. So this is the community end of the facility. The floor's gone in the last few weeks, so it's a sprung wooden floor. You can see there that they were sanding and making sure that it's level and that it's a good quality surface. And then it got lacquered, and then the court lines have been installed in consultation with the different sporting codes. The lines for the different sports have been laid on the floor before it was lacquered, and then when it's completed, those are the lines there. So there's a lot of lines overlaying each other, but it actually didn't end up being as bad as what we thought it was going to be. It's one of those things you think it's going to be a bit of spaghetti, looking like spaghetti, but when you get on a court and you know your lines are black or green or red, it's not so bad. So I've had a bit of a walk around in here. I'm no indoor recreation expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I've played a bit of sport and it seems okay to me, and we've spoken to a few people who have been in there too and experienced with other ones. Just at the community end, this is part of the foyer, the community end, which is where you saw that car on the outside before. So this is just inside and then looking into the arena. Behind this area here, where you can see the reception desk, and there's a little office and some storage room out the back, just where on the right-hand side of that, where there's that sort of black rectangular bit. In behind there's actually a recessed area where some bleachers can go in, so the end court can actually have about 200 spectators who can actually watch, whether it's a feature netball game or volleyball game or whatever, they can actually watch it from there. To the left of there, unfortunately there isn't a photograph, is where the changing facilities and bathrooms and things like that are. Down the school end there's actually 4 large changing rooms, which the community will have access to during when there's large tournaments on and things like that, which have shower facilities. They're actually a good size, but they can be locked off for the school end while school's on, but when the community have regional tournaments and things like that, they can be opened up. So there'll be 6 changing facilities during a tournament. And then the finished interior looks like that. You can see the LED lights, and it's a huge space. And if anyone's driven around up there on the outside, you can see if you've been up to the school, it's a very large space. So that the 4 courts there is looking quite significant. And there's a bit of a dry run going on. So the school's got in there just to have. This is down the school end, just for a bit of the physical education and that sort of thing. So what's happening now is before a planned opening at the end of July, official opening, there'll be the installation of things like the equipment for various sports, goals and nets and things like that. So that's going on. Now that's the trust, which has been formed, has been fundraising for that. We've had some good news around funding for all that ancillary equipment, so that's all chugging along quite nicely. And Liz Khan, who's the facility manager that's been employed by the trust, she's informed me that by the end of next week or early the week after that, then she'll be able to take bookings from a number of the sporting codes who are keen to get into the facility and start using it during next term and towards the back end of this calendar year. So things are moving along nicely. Obviously there's a whole lot of things that need to be worked through, as I've alluded to in the report, around fees and charges. There's a shared use and operating agreement that needs to just be teased out between the centre, the trust, the school and council, and we're working through that at the moment and making good progress on that. And then there's a whole bunch of other operating protocols that are being worked through as well. So things are moving forward, and we've got Liz, the school and staff at Hamilton City Council just working on trying to actually look in the Mayor's diary. We can find a spot that he's free, and also line up school and government officials for an official opening towards the end of July. So we'll let you know the date and the timing of that. I know that the Minister of Education's quite keen to come along to that opening. I'll leave it there, Madam Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Gallagher.
And the local minister, one of the ministers of education, Tim McIndoe, lives. That's in his constituency, isn't it? So he's a minister. Yeah. Anyway, yes, associate minister. But anyway, look. Could you just tell me? And I don't want to. It is cause for reflection. How close is the Rototuna, this wonderful facility, close to the Hamilton boundary?
Yeah.
How many?
Oh, I think it's about 6 metres, or I think the actual school backs onto the boundary, if I remember correctly. So it's very close.
Because certainly I've been wanting to work with our comms team to remind our city that just within 30, 40, 50 metres, there are properties owners who are not paying a bean for this facility, which they will use, their kids will use, apart from through their taxes. And I think I'm going to say, and I'm going to keep going on about this, this is the classic example of a sub-regional facility where we're literally within metres of that facility, a community is not paying and making a contribution to that facility. And that's why this city must proceed with reviewing its boundaries, because we need to reflect, as a city of Hamilton, to take in communities where there's a 100% community of interest. Horsham Down has a 100% community of interest with Hamilton, and this facility is proof pudding of that. And it's our ability, colleagues, to continue to fund alone albeit in this case with the Ministry of Education and with the taxpayer dollars, facilities like this, because clearly this situation can't go on. My question is simply this, was purely how, are you aware of how close this is to the city boundary, which you've answered. Can I now turn to you about with the social wellbeing indicator report, and I think this is also an opportunity for feedback. I'm giving you feedback, so it's not a question. The feedback, I think your decision, Mr. General Manager, is correct and appropriate, because just quickly having a whiz through it before, even around home ownership proportions, whereas it's kind of implying that home ownership is increasing in Hamilton. That's not my knowledge or my sort of feedback or other feedback we're getting. So I think it's really good, your idea of bringing this particular report to a comprehensive workshop, giving a bit of time to dust off some of the figures, because I think what you're telling us, and certainly know Councillor McPherson has been telling us when we've been doing similar things at the DHB, that reality has actually overtaken stats, and particularly with Statistics New Zealand. That's where even our census data is probably now very historical, because the scene has moved. Is that your thought process on that?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that discussion will be useful, and not only for ensuring that the report is useful to the community and groups, but also useful for council in your considerations through the LTP as well.
And in terms of now that this new council is back in the business of social wellbeing, and that's fantastic, but as part of that social wellbeing process, we've got to have good, accurate, predictive data, the best we can get, because again, that's going to be very, in my view, very crucial, Mr. GM.
Councillor McPherson.
A series of great questions from the Deputy Mayor.
Yes.
I had something more mundane to ask in relation to the indoor recreation centre, which is looking good. One of the big issues that sporting codes who use indoor centres around the city have had is coordination of bookings between centres and maximising the use and availability of floor space to the growing number of indoor sports. Is it envisaged, and I know it can't be done from the start, there's a lot of work just to get that one going, is it envisaged that we could head in the direction that Tauranga City Council currently runs in, where the people running the main city-owned recreation centres also coordinate bookings at a number of other centres, including schools, so that there's if someone comes and to make a booking and there's no space available in the centre they asked for, they can be redirected somewhere else and still be able to run their sport or their event. Are we looking at that sort of thing? Because it seems like it may be a good time to do that.
Yeah, it's a great point you bring up, and the answer is yes. And I think if you extrapolate that out a bit further, is when there's a new centre, is making sure that, not that we have enough space anyway, that we don't have facilities cannibalising each other, and making sure that we get the spread of the activities in the right places. Now, there'll always be a bit of tension in that and that sort of thing, and I think, and that's probably a good thing in some ways, where we can actually work through that. But we've talked to Sport Waikato, just saying that we need their help to facilitate those discussions. We obviously have contacts with the YMCA and Boys High and places like that. So the idea is that we do end up with a connectedness around what's happening where, and especially in the community use, and what are the best facilities for each sport. Obviously, we need to talk to each individual sporting code as well, because they'll have their own needs and their own views on that. So the answer to your question is yes, we need to do that. We need to do that pretty soon. I think also in relation to discussion we'll have during the LTP is about, and there was a resolution from last year from council as to what's the next opportunity that there might be for the other forecourt indoor rec centre that was recommended in the regional sports facilities plan as well.
Thanks.
So it's a good point.
And to a second question, to help the Deputy Mayor out, could you confirm that approximately 40% of Rotatuna High School's catchment area is in the Waikato district area?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pascoe.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've just got some questions around the social wellbeing report that I've got here, and
with all due respect, because we're bringing that to a workshop, can we leave those questions to the time that we dwell it, because there are potentially a few small errors in there and some work to be done. We'll bring it to a workshop.
Okay.
Is that okay?
So does that mean that the public meeting scheduled for the 11th of July is now cancelled until we've had a chance to discuss this and whether or not any changes need to be made?
We'll reschedule those, and I'm happy to talk to Andy, and I can talk to you offline, Councillor Rob, around any questions that you've got on that particular draft. So.
Okay, thank you.
That's what you wanted. Yep.
I think so.
Okay, Councillor Henry.
So you're not going to release this report? This report is
not at the moment, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Henry.
Thank you. That was one question I was going to ask too. But the other one that just came out of what Deputy Mayor Gallagher said was now that also that we find out that 40% of the pupils come from outside of Hamilton City to Rototuna School. I just wonder whether we can make the outsiders pay for going to school, and because then they might push the Waikato District Council to move into Hamilton quicker.
The answer was 40% of the geographic area.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the numbers of students actually, but I could find that out. Just to wind it back, when we went through this process, we did formally ask the Waikato District Council to make a capital and an operating contribution to this. They declined at the time, saying that they didn't have any policy guidance on that. The reason being is that they're also looking at potential partnerships up in the north part of their district where they've got significant growth, e.g. the Pocono, Tuakau areas. And on that, the Mayoral Forum has got a working party that's looking at a regional funding formula for sporting, cultural and other types of facilities. So it'll be a guidance type thing that's still chugging through a process. They said they wanted to wait for that process before they funded it. The trust, which Councillor Paula and I are both on representing council, I don't think there's any reason why we can't have another discussion. Actually, the trust asking the Waikato District Council to review whether or not they'd make an operating grant towards this facility.
Okay. So just for clarification, so were we just talking about the indoor recreation facility that might attract 40% of the outside, or were we talking about the whole school?
The school zone.
The school zone. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Mayor King.
Could I ask the General Manager to consider not printing these on expensive glossy pamphlets? We live in a soft copy world, and I think that if somebody wants a copy, there's nothing wrong with a photocopy, a printed copy with a staple in the front top corner. If it's got to be flashed for somebody, we can always put a binding down the side. But it's a very expensive way to be doing business.
Yeah, noted, and that my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that we haven't actually produced a lot of these at the moment, and we do put these online, etc. once they've been approved by council. So a point taken. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. I wanted to ask if you could confirm that the Hamilton City Council owns and operates lots of facilities that lose massive amounts of money, and the beneficiaries of those are from people outside our region, many who are not ratepayers, some who aren't even New Zealanders. I guess I'm just trying to, because I don't think the rec centre is much different from Claudelan's Event Centre or the stadiums and things like that in terms of the dichotomy between who's using them and benefiting from them and who pays for them. I know Martin has consistently, and he's been consistent, good on him, complained about these particular facilities, but there's our whole business, much of our business is based on... Okay,
so I think the point was understood.
Oh, hang on. No, you get to decide when the point's understood from nowadays, eh? Okay. So can you? What is the contrast? Is there a dichotomy between the Rototuna Event Centre and something like Claudelan's or the stadium, which brought in thousands of tourists a week ago?
from my experience, that I would say every council in New Zealand would have facilities that are used by people who don't pay rates in their area, and Hamilton's no different to every other council.
So from that, then, do we run as a charity, quote unquote, or do we expect that those people will drink at our bars and eat in our restaurants and stay in our motels and, I don't know, buy a meat pie from the dairy when they come into Hamilton?
I'm going to answer the question around the Rototuna Rec Centre and other facilities we've got. We do have
That was the reference to the meat pie.
We do have user charges, so people will pay a user charge to use the Rototuna Recreation Centre. And our other facilities have user charges too. To some degree that picks up those people who aren't paying through their rates, but it doesn't pick all of that up.
Yeah, generally, and I assume this will be the same, the user pays part is minuscule by comparison to the capital and operating costs and these sort of things, aren't they? Is that right? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bunting?
So we're going to have a break.
I did.
Thank you.
And you've gone off the board with your question, Deputy Mayor.
No, I'm going to bow to Councillor Bunting's fundamental question.
So thank you very much. Let's just...
And it's banging on the same drum I banged on. On page 17, we talk about being the centre operating mid-late July. Again, can I just please stress we need to put the years in? Okay. July 2017. Yep. I mean, it's quite obvious in this one, but it's a standard complaint of mine which seems to get ignored.
Point made. Thank you very much. So we need to move this report. Remove this report. We need to move this report. Moved Councillor Bunting, seconded Councillor Henry. All in favour? Oh, you want to speak to it? Okay, cool. Sorry, I'd forgotten about that. Because half the questions sounded like speeches anyway. I got a bit carried away. Yes, Mayor Andrew.
Thank you, Lance, for your report. I have had feedback from the Trust and that they're niggling away for more money from this council, and that you're being very firm that this council has no appetite to be putting extra money into this facility at this stage above what we have agreed to already put in. So I just want to say thanks for being firm. Thanks for the pushback right at the start before they start pushing harder. And we have put a lot of money into this facility. It is a great facility, but we have paid our share. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing out I missed the discussion. So is there any other points of discussion? Otherwise we are going to move it and take a break. No? Being no more discussion, we've got a mover and a seconder. All in favour? Opposed? Carried. We will now break till 11:15. And for our visitors, there's a tea and coffee trolley in the foyer here. Please help yourself to a cup of tea or coffee, biscuit. See you soon. Tight on time, and I don't know if someone wants to put their head into the corridor and encourage our visitors who are interested in this item to... Oh, here they come. There we go. So this is item number 8, which is around the public arts plan, and there's a couple of proposals and a set of recommendations against two different projects, so we can deal with those separately if we have to, but then we may not need to. So welcome, Nick.
Thank you. I take the report as read, and just like to thank Margaret and Tim for presenting this morning on the Toti project, and also to Mavora and Kate, and also Bill MacArthur, the chair of the Trust, for all of the work that they've done to bring this project so far. And the other person I'll just quickly acknowledge is John Webb from Chedworth Properties. Is John's proposal around the second project that's on this item. So the two projects being considered today, it is the Dame Hilda Ross artwork at stage 2 of the public art process. So this is where we're seeking approval of the concept of the artwork. The actual site itself was approved by the council in September 2013. And for the second project, Chedworth Park proposal, this one is seeking approval at stage 1 and 2 of the public art process. So that is the design of the work itself and also the location. Also noting that for both of these projects, there is a third stage in our public art process, and that's where we work out things like the exact positioning. That's where a detailed design is developed as well. So I can try and answer questions as best as I can at this point, but there might be a few that we would expect to address before these projects are considered at stage 3. I don't have anything
so
further.
what I suggest is we just keep conversation to one project first, then the second one, just so they don't get all sort of mixed up together. Mm-hmm. And I just remind councillors that we have a process that we approved with its stages, so we're not here to decide whether we like art or we don't like art. We're here to allow the process to go to its next stage, right? So, so if the questions can be around the process, and so we can make that decision, that would be ideal. Thank you. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So are you doing the Toti one first?
Yes, Toti. We'll just discuss
Because I don't have questions on that, so I'll have to come out of the line, won't I? I have questions on Chedworth.
Yeah, I was just going to do Toti first, just to keep it quite clean. Councillor Pascoe.
My question is around part 41, which I guess covers both of the artworks. And the first question I've got is when the art objects are completed and installed, do those assets vest in the council in terms of ownership?
Yes, that's correct. They do become council assets, and they sit within the museum's public art collection. So in terms of any insurance, that's all managed as part of a fine arts portfolio.
Okay, so we would not expect the insurance premium to go up as we add further artworks onto that portfolio?
Approximately every 3 years or so, the portfolio as a whole is assessed by a valuer, and then premiums are determined on that. So I wouldn't be able to say exactly, given that what the values might be for all of the items in the collection, which is the 25 public artworks as well as hundreds and hundreds of other artworks that sit within the museum. So I couldn't give an estimate on what that might mean for the premium, other than it is a very small part of the overall fine arts policy.
Yeah. But it's likely to be quite substantial. The value of the two artworks are likely to be quite substantial.
Generally, the value that they're insured at is the construction value, often to start with, and then over time, certain works may be valued higher.
Yep.
For example, the Ralph Horteray work is quite...
Sorry, if I use Tongue of the Dog as an example, I think that cost around about $600,000 to as the fee to the sculptor, as well as the cost of construction. So that in itself is quite a substantial amount.
Yes, that is, at the moment, that is the most expensive public artwork, at least on construction value, that we've had in the city. Okay. Both of these projects are not to that same value. They're still significant, but the material cost, it is a lot. Well, the work they're both smaller, so it would be a lot smaller than that amount.
Do we have any indication as to how much each of the projects is likely to not cost the council, but in fact come onto the council's books when it's completed?
I can't give specifics at this point. It's something that I would perhaps, if Toti was willing to talk about their target, it might be more suitable there. But for what I can say for the Chedworth Park one, it's under $100,000, so it's a much smaller work. I wouldn't be able to give the exact price though, because that would be negotiation between the artist and the purchaser.
But at the time it's vested in the council, a value is ascertained at that particular point?
Yes, it is, along with a full maintenance schedule. And at that point, that's where we would be agreeing with the donor that this is our commitment to maintain the asset.
Right. Do we claim depreciation on the artworks once they are vested in the council's books?
This is a question I would need to follow up with the museum. I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head for this.
So you don't know whether we actually depreciate, if I use Tongue of the Dog as an example, you don't know whether we depreciate
my involvement with the public art projects is generally only with the political side. I'd be happy to try.
So I think, with all due respect, I think these are really excellent questions, Rob, and clearly Nick's unable to answer them at the moment. I don't want to necessarily put you in the spotlight on this right now, but I would suggest that we come back. Yes?
Yeah, all I'm going to say is that artworks in the museum and so forth aren't depreciatedly valued, and generally there's appreciation associated with most of them, so we take an evaluation approach. We have our artworks valued for insurance purposes, and we use that to reflect our accounting valuations as well. But I'll just follow up and send an email out to council as part of the executive update on that.
So we don't depreciate any of those assets at all?
No, if they're considered art, no.
And this is considered art?
I need to follow up that specifically.
That answers my question, because I would suspect that it would be quite substantial, the depreciation could be quite a substantial cost, when in fact the report says it's quite, that the costs are not considered significant.
Sorry, my statement was about our art collection. I need to follow up how this public art reflects into that, and I will do so and notify that as part of the executive update, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we can have some whole information about that topic would be good, wouldn't it?
Certainly would be good going into the
LTP. Yeah. Yeah, no, I understand you. I think that's good. You've got that. Okay, thank you. Councillor McPherson, now we're just talking on the first art project.
Yeah, so cut me off, I was same as Councillor Leary.
So you're dropping off for this moment. Councillor Bunting? Sorry, I thought it would be more useful this way.
No worries, no dramas. Just with our experience now with two similar projects like Sappermore and it might be a Lance or a Richard question, Sappermore and with Captain Hamilton. What are the maintenance costs proven to be for these? There's not that much?
No, minimal for both projects. In the report, we can't get a detailed estimate until all of the detailed designs are done. But what we can say is, based on previous works, like we've used the Sappermore Jones one and Captain Hamilton as an example, the proactive maintenance requirements are very minimal, and mostly that we're looking at is around the wax treatment that's required every 5 years.
Right.
There is a reactive side as well, and we do have, for example, if one of our artworks are tagged, then tag busters do a great job of dealing with it. Often there have been a few times where they've been tagged and they're so proactive that it's gone before anyone's seen it. So there is a reactive side there, but from a proactive side, it's minimal for these works. As Tim mentioned earlier in the public forum, bronze, very robust material.
Yeah, cool. Great, thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
Thank you. Councillor Henry.
Thank you so much, Nick. Just one question, just for clarification. So we don't pay for the preparation of the site either. That's all included in the whole artwork. Is that right? Because we just heard how heavy that bronze statue will be, the Dame Hilda Ross one. So
at this stage, the construction costs and installation is met by the donor, but just from hearing some of those conversations earlier, the piano weight, we've dealt with artworks, well, Toti has as well, much heavier artworks. We were talking about seven tonnes of granite in the middle of the road. So they're working around the weight of the piano, as it was discussed then. It is very light in comparison. So we would be working to make sure that the foundation's done in a way also just to protect any nearby services underground.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a question myself on this one in terms of the plaza around it. The staff are working around, at the staff level, some discussion is happening how we can change this space into a proper plaza. When would we know more about that? The detail that might contain?
In about a month's time. I have to say we don't have budget for that at the moment. We'll have to look at what that costs, and probably firstly what it actually looks like. So I know that Maria and our Parks and Open Spaces team will work with Margaret and the team just around what that could look like, and then obviously there'll be some cost implications of that. But we'll have a sniff through our budgets and see what we can do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so in terms of the Chedworth properties, let's take any questions that are a matter rising from that. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quick questions. I'm assuming through reading this that the park that it's going to be located on will be ours, our public space. How big is it?
It's a section of land which will be primarily used as a stormwater swale, but there is a small part of that which will be public space pathway. So the exact details on this are still being worked through at the moment. That is why at this stage we've given an indication of where the site is going to be within the development, and then there would be an exact site presented later on as the project progresses, which would show exactly where it is, and also the exact layout of the pathway as well.
So it's not a park as such, it's just some green space where there'll be a stormwater management? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so clearly then there's nothing else that we've got planned for that space?
It's a very long, thin piece of land, so it's from what I've seen of the plan, it's unlikely to be used other than an area where there's going to be paths and being able to walk through the kind of connecting up to different streets within development.
Okay, so this piece of art will be seen by those people using those walkways?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bunting.
I was following on from Angela's question there. I was trying to work out where exactly it is, because I and Jay, I can work it out. Jay, I presume on your map there, have you got your map there? That's, I presume, where the shopping centre is and that sort of stuff there. And is that right?
The current shopping area, my understanding is it just falls outside of I&J, next to the road corridor there. So there's shopping centres on both sides of Padoa Boulevard. Yeah. But the area where the artwork is within an area that will be a residential development.
So will it be sort of towards town of it or towards... Because at the moment it's in the middle of an apartment block, and just, according to the map. So I'm just trying to work out.
No, it's within an area it's designated as a stormwater swale and public space. So it's near new development, new residential development. One thing that when we would consider it at stage 3 of the public art process is by then we would actually the whole development itself would be further along in the process, and we'd be able to give an exact indication of where that sits.
Yeah, cool.
But the primary reason of seeking endorsement at stage 1 and 2 today is because that gives the developer certainty that, there's an interest of council to pursue this, and stage 3 is the kind of the final sign-off, but it means that it gives certainty that he can engage with the artist.
Right.
Otherwise, the risk is engaging with an artist to work on this when there's a chance it may not even be approved by council.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thanks, Nick. Just on the Chedworth installation or proposed, is this, you said this is something that the Webb's approached us about?
Yes.
Yeah. Are we at all proactive in going to other developers with concepts like this? Because, I mean, it's great they did that. It would be even greater if everyone did that. I know we've had 1 or 2 others, but they seem to be sort of come out of the blue, and I'm wondering what measures we maybe have taken or could take to spread the word that there'll be great public appreciation for developers that include artworks within their development.
Currently within our public art plan that was adopted end of 2015, there isn't as much of a proactive approach as there has been in the past, but that's something that we can certainly look at around this one, which is something that's been initiated by the developer. But I can certainly have conversations about how that can be used as an example to show others how there's been that kind of relationship with council.
Even if we could, as a start-off measure, proactively highlight, say, in City News, the things like this. I mean, I fully support the work that Toti does. That's in public places. This is, private sector getting into the game as well, which could make for a really great city sort of facility, having installations like this all over the place.
I think we could promote that through the developers meeting that Kelvin team has regularly with developers, which is quite well attended. So maybe I could get Nick to go along to that and just have a short piece there.
That'd be great.
Okay, thank you. So we're done with the questions. So the recommendations are there. We received the report, and then we've got B, which is the concept at stage 2, and C, which is stages 1 and 2 of the public arts process. Any debate on that, Councillor Gallagher? No, you're moving it? Moving it. Councillor O'Leary seconds it. Would you like to speak to it?
Yes, I may or may not have reply. Look, I just want very obviously compliment this particular project, and also I'll just quickly deal with Chedworth, and I think just as a helpful, constructive comment that in future if we could just get a more of a detailed map picture location, because I want to pick up also on Councillor McPherson's point. We want to encourage developers to do exactly this. This is really excellent. So I think just probably a better map in that regard. In terms of Dame Hilda, it is also quite timely given the fact that we're going to be facing some stage this year the big huge decisions of the next steps in terms of our major performing arts centre. And I love this particular work because this is also emphasising creativity, artistic. There's a whole lot of things that come out of this particular sculpture. That's just me as an ordinary lay person, but I think it does underscore the creativity in the city as well. And again, for those councillors who have not, and people have not seen One Hell of a Fight, definitely worth going to see, because again, what I love about the Toti Trust, the spin-off from all the work that the Toti Trust has done and the writers of One Hell of a Fight, is that they are adding now to the wonderful tapestry of our history and what they're coming through, thanks to Mark Courtner and our library, and is the treasure trove of documentation around that sort of 20th century Hamilton history. So all of this, in my view, adds to that. So it's not just that Dame Hilda was an amazing person in her own right, but it's taking us on a journey with Sappermore Jones, with Dame Hilda, one hell of a fight. All of these things is a mature city, a mature small city, rediscovering and celebrating its incredible history. And it's good because in that sense we're hoping that the wonderful women and men who are the great characters of our 20th century, 19th century history are not forgotten. And this is just, in my view, a very significant step, Madam Chair, in emphasising that. And I think this is just going to be such a wonderful project. And I just want to thank the Toti Trust so much for the work that they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to provide a little bit of context. When I first started on council, the landscape for public art was barren in the city, certainly in terms of what it is today. And any time that a project came in front of us, which was usually driven by us, was incredibly politically charged and always made the front page of the paper for all the wrong reasons. I think that this is where we are today, and we're looking at another significant project from Toti that hasn't cost us anything and hasn't cost the ratepayer directly anything through their rates bill, is exceptional and actually is a reflection of the work that this council did some years ago through redefining our place in public art, which is to enable that to happen freely in the community, because they know much better than politicians do what works, where it works. They tell the stories better, they tell our history better, and that's significant, and a significant change politically in this room. So I applaud Toti, I applaud Mesh, and I applaud any future public art projects that will be delivered without political interference, but just with political support. So well done, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you. I'll be strongly supporting both of these initiatives, and I'd like to take this opportunity to also thank Toti and Chedworth Developments, and I'd also like to congratulate us as a council for moving along in the direction that Angela was talking about there before, because now, gone are the days, as we're seeing with so many decisions we're making, gone are the days where the council buys your stuff. That's it. And you live in that city. If you like it, you stay. If you don't, you go. I believe that we're becoming a council, an enabling council, which is very, very exciting. I love the fact that there seems to be a mood in the group of let's start with yes and move from there, so which is really encouraging to these wonderful groups like Toti, like Chedworth Developments. We'll see it with recreation, we'll see it with building, we'll see it with more than just art space shortly. So fantastic work, really, really cool, and I love the fact that the community is doing it and we're not choosing it.
Thank you very much. Mayor King?
Yeah, Tim Elliott, the bare feet on the child, I think it's a fantastic touch. It just brings us back to that era, that carefree era of those days. Certainly not PC, or certainly frowned upon in this era. But I think it adds into the era of Dame Hilda, and at that time when we all used to run around in bare feet. And I also just want to say well done to Toti and Chedworth for investing in our great city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor King. To say a few things myself, if I might, I'm delighted with both projects. Actually, yesterday, a number of my colleagues were with me when we heard various presenters talking about quality urban design at the Property Council event. And a key point being that a happy, fun city is a good city. So, you know, art is part of creating that feeling of happiness and fun and vibrancy. It's all very good. I just want to say, I just want to say that I really do hope that we will be able to find the resources to create a proper plaza effect around the Hilda Ross piece of art. The reason being that I believe good cities offer plazas that are carless, that are focused on walking, that are quality places for people to meet, mix, mingle. And we don't have, in my personal view, enough really good quality pedestrian plazas in the city yet, although we're progressing that way. And I hope this can become one. And I understand that the business owners adjacent to the space, around this space, are extremely excited about participating in how you create that into a total space. And I think that's very exciting. I'd like to see some visual connection to Centre Place across the road. There is a road there. Pedestrians do need to cross, but I think we can do some treatments that would make it more pedestrian friendly and more connected. The planting's a little bit tired there. There's a lovely pretty tree in that box, but everything else is pretty average in the way of planting. And so I think, you know, a general spruce up would give us a win-win. We'd get this beautiful piece of art in a beautiful space that's been designed for people. So that's what I hope the outcome will be. Thank you very much to Toti for your work, and to the artist for your creativity and inspiration. And I'm sure you're very excited about having this piece of art in the city and seeing people enjoy it. And I'm certain that they'll sit there and pretend they're playing the piano, even if they can't actually. You know, who knows what will come out of that space. So thank you very much. Councillors, we've got a mover and a seconder. I'm going to put it to the floor. All in favour? Aye. Opposed? Carried. I should have used the voting button. We'll use the voting button. It makes it easier to record. Sorry. For main voting. Yes, thank you. Okay. There you go. Everybody's happy. That's good. Thank you. So now we'll move on to the next item, which is the community occupancy of the Hillcrest Bowling Club.
Good morning. Through the chair, I ask that you please take the report as read, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I think that's the way to go. You can see that there's a suite of recommendations from the council. They're all pretty business orientated around the costs and terms. So we'll take some questions if there are any. Hang on, I'll just get my discussion button up. Councillor McPherson.
Yeah. Thanks. Look, I just want to explore the change from 2006, was it, until now, when we are now saying we need to build a bigger reservoir. I'm a bit surprised that hasn't come to us beforehand, because if I was in the Hillcrest Bowling Club, I would be concerned that, because I remember I think I moved the motion that we sell a bit of the land and use that to shift them down to the other place, which would help in two ways, to help them personally, but also help establish bowling as the bowling clubs together on the new Eastlink site. Now we're sort of seem to be saying, well, you've got 5 years, but after that you're on your own. Am I viewing that right? Because of the sudden expansion and needs of the reservoir?
Yes, I think there's two parts to that. One is that the recent stormwater master plan that's been prepared by the City Infrastructure Group has been based on updated population projections, and has identified that a larger reservoir is needed, so the whole site is now required. So yeah, in terms of long-term certainty for Hillcrest, there is none at that site. And I think the other part of that is that the landscape for bowls has changed significantly since 2006. And
they're no longer on flat surface. Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, so we've got a number of bowling clubs in Hamilton. We've just seen the Stadium Bowling Club has recently folded due to sustainability issues. So I think even if that option to relocate was still on the cards, it wouldn't be recommended anyway due to the decline in the sport.
Well, is there a decline in the Hillcrest Bowling Club membership? I take your point about that sport overall, but I'm thinking of what's Hillcrest's situation, or do they reckon they'll sort of 5 years' time, will they be winding down anyway?
Yeah, pretty much. So their membership decreased from 85 members in 2010, from 85, to 61 members in 2017. And Bowls New Zealand recommend that clubs have over 150 players per green. At Hillcrest at the moment, they've got about 30. So long term, the club, it is likely, based on what's happening with bowls across the country, that the club won't be sustainable.
Is there another bowling club, I can't remember, established at Eastlink already?
No.
So, because the original idea was to amalgamate, was it not Hamilton East and Hillcrest, or were two of them at least at Eastlink?
Yeah, so we've got 4 other bowling clubs. So stadiums recently folded, but we've got United Women's, which are off in Fairfield, and Bearers Court and Myra Road, and Claudelands, as well as Hillcrest on council land, and then there are a number of bowling clubs on private land as well. So I think there's 10 all up in the city.
What I'm trying to explore is what ones are over in that area that would, what bowling facilities, if Hillcrest closed, would be still over in that further Hamilton East Hillcrest area.
Yeah, there's Claudelands.
Which is backed by just over the bridge.
Yeah. So they lease
Kitchener.
the car park off council, but they own their own land. Yeah, and they're quite a strong club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the closest one.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll speak later on this. I've got concerns about the fact that we're dealing with only one part of the issue.
Okay, thank you.
So if I can just add to that, yeah, we are working with Sport Waikato, Bowls Waikato, and all of the bowling clubs to look at the sustainability of the sport going forward and options. So last year we had several meetings and tried to encourage the clubs to relocate and amalgamate at Stadium Bowling Club. And Hillcrest did consider that as an option, but they didn't want to pursue it. They wanted to stay where they were.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the lack of facilities in that part of the city, which is a decent chunk. So I take your point generally again about the sport, but
okay, so we'll come to the...
We're being told we've got an ageing population in Hamilton. May well be.
Yeah, so you can raise those thoughts and challenges in your debate, and then we can use those, Councillor Mallett.
And my questions are on a very similar vein. So how many? Do you know how many bowlers we've got, registered bowlers in the city? No, I can't. Sorry, you don't. Okay. Because Dave's concerns are obviously real, but my concern is that we may have an ageing. Well, we do have an ageing population, but perhaps they're simply just not playing bowls, and things have changed. So. And Dave's concerns are real. If there are lots of bowlers out there who can't, and obviously our older folks tend to be less able to drive and things like that, so proximity. But if there is only a couple of dozen bowlers over there anyway, and we've got a very expensive piece of land that's being used for that, I guess I'm just concerned. Well, I hope that your team, you're reasonably comfortable that there will be sufficient bowling opportunities for people on the east side of the river in 5 years' time when we close down this lease.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. And I think, we're recommending we're not recommending we don't grant this club a new lease. We're recommending 5 years, so that gives some flexibility. And we can, if the club is strong or does increase in membership, which is unlikely based on the projections for bowls, then council can consider a new lease at the end of the 5 years again.
How strong is the need for the building the reservoir?
It's required, but my understanding is it's not required until beyond about 2030.
Oh, so it's a long way out.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henry.
Thank you. I just have one question. You talked about that you talked to Sport Waikato. Have you asked, just following on from what Councillor McPherson asked, have you asked what the older people are playing now, or what kind of sport they are tending to go towards nowadays? Sure.
Yeah, I think so. One thing to add as well is that a lot of bowls is being played at like cosmopolitan clubs and those kind of venues as well. Often because you're able to drink and that
Socialise.
kind of thing. Yeah.
More.
But
Okay,
yeah, also,
fair enough.
I mean,
fair
Lance
enough.
may.
They like to be social.
Lance may be able to add to this, but yeah, my understanding is that you know, a lot of informal recreation activities, walking and that sort of thing.
Swimming and walking.
Yeah.
Swimming and walking. Cool.
So there again, that's somewhere where Sport Waikato is working with us, isn't it, to anticipate the need. And actually, I'll probably remind you later about the need to provide for swimming in our city. I just mentioned that in passing. Okay, so thank you for the questions. The recommendations are there, and now we'll get into debate. Councillor Gallagher. Oh, I'll move. Do you want to move? So move either way. Yep.
Which I'll ask you two to consider taking on board. There'll be a sort of a C6. Roman numeral 6.
Okay.
Something along the lines, I haven't finished the wording, sorry, it came a bit quicker, but it's that staff report back to the Community and Services Committee within 6 months, say, on the future of bowling clubs and their strategic locations around the city, I think.
Okay, get the gist of it. That's not a problem, is it?
If I can just add, we're also bringing the Stadium Bowling Club expression of interest to the next elected member briefing in July, so we may be able to touch on some of that at that meeting as well.
Well, I'm comfortable to add that in.
It may be that staff choose to do it then, yeah.
There'll be more information to hand because this is not the only bowling club issue that we're dealing with at the moment, so be quick. You happy to put that in?
Thanks.
Okay, so I've moved and Martin's seconding. I've got no comment to make, but we've got comments coming from Councillor McPherson. Have you?
Oh, well, all right, okay, I'll...
Oh, sorry.
I wasn't trying to get in first, I was just trying to get the
you
amendment.
look like you're first on my list, but anyway,
Okay.
sorry. Go.
Me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Look, I think it's a sensible move infrastructure-wise for the city, and I support the Scout one as well. But I think that we need to be careful with sporting organisations, voluntary organisations of any sort, in fact, that are on council land, that we don't sort of forget future recreation or other activities, needs of a growing community while we're sorting out our infrastructure. We have to do them both together. So I'm not suggesting we don't do this, but I'm suggesting that we've probably got 5 years within which to look at the long-term direction, and I know that some of the bowling clubs can be a bit curmudgeonly about having to look at moving, and I mean, Te Rapa Bowling Club went down to 7 members before it closed, which was good because volleyball got their facility, but that aside, we don't want that to happen. We want them to amalgamate so they're sustainable or do other things so they're sustainable. But we also have to make sure, you know, if you're thinking about mainly elderly participants in bowls, they don't want to go to the opposite side of the city to bowl. So we need to think of localities and the villages that those facilities are in as well. So that's where I'm coming from by adding that bit in. I think we need to make sure we're not making decisions up there and then over at the stadium in isolation from those needs. So we have to have a good handle on the needs when we're making these decisions. Thanks.
Very cool. Councillor Gallagher.
That ties in with what I was going to say. I totally agree with Dave. I think we do need to maintain the big picture, and also part of that narrative is kind of, you know, the local facilities in an area. So we have a big debate around, you know, keeping the Hillcrest Library open and extending it, sort of a micro look, you know, at a local neighbourhood and what we can offer. And in that sense, I just want to be very supportive of the Scout Association lease, declare an interest that I used to go to First Frankton. That was my old Scout hall when I met the first great Mayor, Dr. Dennis Rogers, and my interest in local government was ignited. But the issue here is, I think it's a reminder to us all that we are very much in the social wellbeing business. And the fact that we can actually, instead of selling it from under them, which another council would have done, we can actually say to the Scout Association that here we are, we're helping you with a community lease. This is a partnership. The well-beings are the really great things for the Girl Guides, the Scouts, the young people. So I think, can I just say that when we do our workshops, it's really good and so important that we actually keep reminding ourselves and having a strategy, because while you've been talking about the bowling club, the Scout Association lease in Norton Road, Frankton, is another example of how we're making a small contribution through that lease for well-beings of a whole lot of young people. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So it has been moved and seconded. We'll go to the vote, please. Are we waiting on someone? No? Good. Thank you.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. Brings us on to item 10, which is the Hamilton Zoo Master Plan. Welcome.
Okay, so obviously the report's mine, but Nick did the analysis on the consultation feedback. I do want to give you an introduction to this paper. New Zealanders are passionate about zoos and wildlife parks. Research carried out for Sport New Zealand a couple of years ago found that 37% of people in the Waikato are passionate about zoos and wildlife parks, and this is second only to movies at 46%. This supports research in Australia in 2009, which found that 36% of the population visit zoos each year. This was more than any other entertainment except movies at 65%. Engaging with nature makes people feel good, and urbanisation increases the need for parks and zoos. Sir David Attenborough recognised this in 2004 when he said, "Today, more and more of us live in cities and lose any real connection with wild animals and plants." Conservation, discovery and learning, and animal welfare were key drivers for the Hamilton Zoo Master Plan, not only because they are the right things for a zoo to do, but also because they support the visitor experience. Let's face it, we need people to visit if we are to achieve our conservation and education goals. In April, this committee approved public consultation for the Hamilton Zoo Master Plan. We received 194 submissions over a one-month period. What is more, 45% of respondents were young families, and it is unusual to have a high proportion of submissions from this demographic group. Yes, we did have a few respondents who thought we were numpties for supplying a plan without funding, and one even quoted Councillor Mark Bunting on this. But only 10% stated it should not be funded. We put the plan in place to attract the funding because, from a business sense, no funding options would or should be considered without a plan in place. 83% of respondents thought the projects would support the desired outcomes of fun, conservation, education and sustainability. Planned work on the zoo entrance was strongly supported, as was the improved connection with Waiwhakareke Natural Heritage Park. Many of the 71% of submitters who supported this also thought it was time that the park was open for full public access. Additionally, this consultation has provided a treasure trove of ideas that will help shape delivery on the Hamilton Zoo Master Plan. Staff's recommendation is to approve the Hamilton Zoo Master Plan as it sets a clear direction for the zoo, even if the projects are not funded at this time. Many of these projects should appeal to external funders as they consider their environmental motivations and obligations. Approval gives the zoo direction and enables us to develop those attractive funding proposals.
Nick.
I don't have anything further to add at this point, other than I'm happy to take any questions on the details of the analysis and the response.
Okay, so we'll take questions on the full report. Back any general stuff to Stephen and anything on the responses from the consultation, Nick might be able to cover off. Okay, so first up is Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few questions. What would be the consequences for the zoo and wider for the city if we decided to not go ahead with this plan?
I think I've clearly said that at the end of the day, we need a plan to see our way forward. You know, at the end of the day, any business requires a plan for its future. My personal fear is that if nothing happens at the zoo, gradually we will see a decline in attendance. And you know, at the end of the day, it's about this plan is all about creating a bigger entrance combined with Waiwhakareke that will enable more visitors to come to the zoo. At the moment, we think we're pretty much at our limit. And it will also enable us to build revenue from other sources. At the end of the day, we only have 130,000 visitors at the moment. There are other zoos that have a lot more than that, and I believe that we should be looking at around 250,000 to make the zoo reasonably viable. I think that would be achievable as the master plan is rolled out, and that certainly underpins the development programme in that master plan.
In real terms that we can understand, how much of an impact do we have and how much of a contribution do we have in terms of conservation and in terms of the activities that our zoo carries out, and how much impact does that have through wildlife conservation?
Right at this moment, I would say that we could do a lot better. I mean, that's the reality. We're not specifically funded for conservation. But we already do punch above our weight in this field. We've put something like 500 brown teal back into the wild over the last couple of decades. That's a significant number of birds going back into the wild to support that population. We have raised more than $50,000. Sorry, we have put out. Contributed more than $50,000 to in situ conservation. We've actually got another 20,000 that we can allocate in the future. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we're doing, but there's a whole bunch that we can be doing better. But probably the main thing that we focus on at the moment is education. And that's education about conservation as well as being about the general natural world.
And you get school tours, don't you, to coming in all the time to go through your education programs that you've got there?
So our formal education programs, we have about 8,000 students come through a year. 8,000. And but we consider that we also educate every visitor that comes through the zoo through keeper talks, through signage, through encounters, etc.
And how realistic are we being with this vision, this plan, in attracting external funding, do you think?
At the moment, we've obviously not gone out for any external funding. We believe that we should be looking at a figure of 30% as readily achievable. That's certainly been achieved by the Hamilton Gardens. And it may be that we could attract more, but without having a master, a plan in place, it's very difficult to start going out and talking to people about significant funding.
And last question, you talk about the visitor spikes that we get when a new fur baby is born, or we open a new exhibit, and over the life of the new plan, that's programmed in there to happen at certain points. What is it like? What kind of spikes do you actually get when was the last baby? Was it a rhino? Was the last?
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, births, my belief is they really sustain business as usual. The real increases are seen when there is a new development. And look, I was director at Auckland Zoo, and there, we had years of data to support that. Immediately after a new exhibit, you would get something like a 20% increase in visitation that year, and then gradually that would drop off over time. But if you were incrementally adding exhibits, so say one every 3 years, you would be able to capitalise on the next exhibit before the decline had met the previous visitation number. So, in my time at Auckland Zoo, we saw and this is an amazing growth. It's not the norm, I hasten to add, but we saw visitation growth from about 350,000 visitors per year to just over 600,000 in a 3-year period. The reason I say that's not normal is because, as well as the sorry, in a 6-year period, I must get that right, as well as the development programme, we also had a TV series that was going on at the same time. So it became quite difficult to determine what was due to the new exhibits and what was due to the effect of the TV series. But since then, they've obviously still had a development programme going on. The TV series hasn't been on now for 2 or 3 years, and they're sustaining 700 to 750,000 visitors a year.
And just last question, I attended the Friends of the Hamilton Zoo's AGM the other day, and Dave and Jessie, I think is it, came and presented. And Jessie was talking about a new program that we've got where we're employing new keepers, bringing new people, young people into a zoo and training them. It sounded to me like training them sort of from the beginning and giving them that sort of on-the-job experience. Is that something new in zoos?
To a degree, we've always done it. For example, every year the zoo has 2 University of Waikato students who are there specifically to learn about keeping, and they have effectively work experience for a whole year. But we generally try and get people that at least have a grounding in being a keeper, in animal care. So Unitec run a course, for example, and we would expect people to at least have that foundation certificate in that. But this programme really is very innovative for zoos in New Zealand. It's very much focused on developing our own staff, but ultimately other zoos will benefit because we don't get staff just stay in one zoo for their whole careers necessarily. I think it's a very exciting programme. It's the first one I'm aware of in a zoo in New Zealand of this kind.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Paula. I just want to explore the issue of funding just a little bit more. Number 42 on page 39, the second to last bullet point, under the section of what happens if we approve the Hamilton Zoo Master Plan. It says, it does not commit the council to funding, but enables funding plans to be developed and external funding options to be explored. How is that? How will that work? How are you planning to explore these funding options?
Okay, so the first thing that once, assuming that this plan gets signed off, the next phase is actually to bring projects forward as part of the 10-year plan process. And to do that, we've got to start to do a lot of detailed analysis on those plans. I'll be quite honest, I've just stood down as zoo director and I've actually taken up an executive projects manager role for the community group, and that's one of my projects. So if you don't approve this plan, I'm out of a job by the sound of it. So that's one element of it. And the other element is that inevitably to get external parties interested in funding, you've got to have a plan to begin with. You've got to have projects that they can get interested in. And then you've also got to have at least some interest from the governing body for that zoo. So, you know, it would be, it's hopeless us trying to go out and seek external funding if there is no master plan. That's a reality. But as to all of that detail, the first phase would be to give you the detail through the 10-year plan process. We might have time to start getting some conversations going with external providers. And then, you know, once we know where we're heading on that, we can actually go out and actively seek that funding. We have a couple of staff in the community group that's their job. Their job is to go out and seek external funding. We know that other zoos have raised significant proportions of their master plans through external funding. Auckland Zoo paid for a whole veterinary complex at over $5 million raised by the trust. So we know it's feasible. Wellington Zoo had a $21 million development and 25% of that was raised by them. So 30% seems reasonable to us. And, you know, the next stage is to start testing that, I suppose.
Right, okay. So
Can I just jump in there? Been heavily involved with the Hamilton Gardens program for the last 4 or 5 years. Stephen's right, so you need to identify the projects where council needs skin in the game if you're going to actually be able to attract some external funding. You need to identify the components of projects or projects where you could potentially get significant funding. I mean over 75% from a outside source. That might be a high net worth individual as a particular enthusiasm for the zoo. And they're quite happy to fund a whole component of a project or a whole project. So I think it'll be horses for courses and actually look through the components of the development plan if it was approved, with the master plan, and then actually look at what's the low-hanging fruit and the prioritisation around what's needed first. So I think there'll be some where council would need some skin in the game. There'll be others where we may not need to have so much skin in the game, and then we'd get Lisa, who's our external funding person, to then work up the strategies around that and aim towards those particular funding areas for that.
Thank you. So is the zoo set up in the same way as the gardens for the purpose of attracting funding?
No, it's a little bit different. Peter's had a series of trusts which used to be set up for each new garden that was being developed. In recent times there's been the Hamilton Gardens Development Trust, which has a bunch of people, John Dobson leading that. That's been successful, and that's really been raising funds for the whole project and the whole precinct over the last 5 or 6 years. At the moment we've got the Friends Group. I think there would be the opportunity to look at similar model to what Peter and the Trust has done at Hamilton Gardens. I think that's been quite a successful model. It will probably need its own nuances with the type of facility that the zoo is, and then move forward from there. So I think there is the opportunity, and I think with Bruce Clarkson here this morning, I think there's opportunity to think about that with Waiwhakariki as well, and that. And Bruce alluded to the potential unique offering of the exotic fauna on one side of the road and the native fauna on the other side of the road. So I think there's quite a unique opportunity on the outskirts of a major metropolitan area. So I think it'd be about thinking that through very carefully.
So we would look to set up a trust in a similar way?
That would be my view. Yep. I think there's a real opportunity there, and I suspect that you would get some keen individuals outside of the council who've got particular skills or networks who would like to get involved in that. And I think that's where the expertise that Stephen talks about in my team can actually help with that. And we've given a lot of help with that with Hamilton Gardens. It's been very successful.
Thank you. Just a little bit more, not too much more, but I'm just wondering with the way it will come back to council during the 10-year plan. I mean, will we be asked to say, like, here's a water hole, it's going to cost $1 million, council needs to put up 500 and we'll hope to get it from somewhere else, or are we going to be a bit more creative than that?
That'll be part of it, but I think you'll have what I talked about before. There'll probably be a bit of a mixed bag, and then obviously you will need to weigh that up against all the other priorities and pressures that council's got.
Yeah.
So we'll be able to say, well, here's the low-hanging fruit components of this where we think we can get significant external funding. Here's the other projects where we think that the council, because of the nature of the project, would have to have some skin in the game to attract, that 30% or that 50% that Stephen was talking about before. So I think there'll be a range there, going forward, obviously, then that can be revisited during annual plans and future LTPs as well.
Yeah, I'm just worried that we're going to be going to the same usual suspects for funding, the big trusts and all that sort of stuff, in the government or whatever. And I just wonder, is there more opportunity for tie-ups with business? Can we not go and say, hey, can we not have someone present to us and say, hey, this is going to be the Norris Ward water hole or something, and bang. It's all tied up and ready to go.
So, as I said before, I think that's an area that we would explore around corporates, and I think that's an area that we've had some success at Hamilton Gardens, but it was an area that we were looking at further. But like I said, my experience is that if you need to find the people who have a particular interest in something. Someone might like zoos, who is a CEO of a large corporate, whereas another CEO is probably not and likes the gardens or likes the theatre or likes something else. So I think that's where you need to do that networking and find out that information. I think you're dead right, and that's why we have a prioritisation process within council, so we don't cannibalise ourselves around where we're applying to funds. And an issue that Councillor Dave brought up before, there is a paper coming back which Helen's team are bringing back around external funding and how we go about that.
Thanks, Lance.
Thank you. Councillors, I was a bit remiss because I was approached earlier. Just to let you know that Councillor O'Leary has a motion she would like to put at the appropriate stage, so I'll just create the place for that. Do you want to? Yeah, I know.
And the Deputy Mayor's seconding that, so when you're ready.
Okay, so that's just to let you know that there's a motion being received. So, okay, let's carry on with the questions, and apologies for missing that. Councillor Casson.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen and Nick. Just remind me again, what's the projected cost of implementing the plan and which includes the full build?
Okay, like all plans, they develop over time. We've got 5 phases in this in the master plan that we are focused on. Initially, that was planned for a 10-year time frame, but that is likely to change, I would suspect. And that is, let me get the exact figure, 15.688 million.
Okay. And you've answered one of my other questions I was going to have, was the patronage of the park, and you said it's at 130,000 per year?
Yes, so in the 10-year, the last year we almost attained 130,000. It looks like we'll attain 130,000 this year. Because there's no guarantee that that's sustainable long term, our KPI over the next 10 years will be 125,000.
Okay.
But,
All right, so that's less than the entire population of Hamilton visiting once a year. So look, how much does it cost to operate the zoo per year on average?
So at the moment it's costing us about 3.7 million per annum on direct operating costs, plus another million indirect. And our revenue is about 1.7 million projected. This year, I think that's about that. We're looking at recovering in future years, bearing in mind there's additional costs because of the health and safety initiatives. We're looking at recovering 33% per annum. Until recently, it was closer to 40% per annum.
Okay, so 3.7 million plus 1 million.
So 4.7 million less about 1.7 million. Yeah.
Okay, so
about 3 million net.
Yeah.
All right, so the loss each year, if I calculate, is around about, is it running a loss of about 2 million a year?
So no, 3 million is the net cost to council.
Okay.
If you
all right.
take it that way.
Net cost to make those.
Net
right.
cost to make those.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor King.
Stephen, you're obviously very enthusiastic about this. In your presentation, you've clearly showed that you're very, very keen on this. From how you've presented, you're certainly not neutral. You haven't just reported on, you've written a report and presented it to us where you obviously showed your hand that you're very biased towards this happening, and your background, of course, would back that up, but that's understandable. But you've presented in a way where you're totally trying to sell this to us.
Is there a question there, Mayor King?
Yeah, there's a question.
I'm passionate about the zoo.
So isn't the job of the report writer to write an unbiased, balanced report that laid out on the feedback of what happened from the public consultation?
I've been largely...
So that we can make a decision based on actually what the feedback is from the public, not your feedback as staff.
I've been involved in the report writing. I've largely written the analysis of the report, so I can say that the everything that's presented in the attachment has been analysed by me in a neutral way.
And I sign off on the report, and I was comfortable with the report and the recommendations.
I'm not comfortable that the presentation was done in a neutral way.
Okay, so I guess that's for
I
your
have more
commentary.
questions.
Yeah.
So part of what you said was living with nature and living with nature. How is this living with nature when the animals are held in captivity against their will? Where's the nature part of that?
So the reality is that many people do not come into contact with animals in any shape or form. And it's not so bad in New Zealand because it's a small population. But when you go overseas, then clearly there's vast numbers of people that live in cities with very little contact with animals. So it's not... so it is contact with nature. It's precisely the same as a park. A park is not nature as we know it in the wild. This is animals that are in confinement, yes, but we can still be showing them in as natural a habitat as possible.
You said that people would stop coming if we don't invest.
That's my view, and I did say that. At the end of the day, we know that any business that doesn't get any funding is ultimately going to decline. And certainly, I think that's going to be the case with the zoo.
But the zoo numbers are going up. We're not investing and zoo numbers are going up.
We have, we've put a lot of effort at the zoo into baby animals. We've put a lot of effort into bringing in new animals as much as possible. We've put a lot of effort into the visitor experience to get people coming back. But that only sustains your business over a limited period. Without further investment in the zoo, you cannot be growing significantly.
Don't we have a boutique zoo at the moment, which is different to what Wellington and Auckland have got? Aren't we the smallest city by far in amount of population who has a zoo run by the city like this? And it's a boutique model. Numbers, you've told us that if we don't spend $15 million, people are going to stop coming, and yet we haven't spent anything there for years. We've just been holding the fort and numbers have been going up. So isn't it contrary to what your argument is? Isn't your own figures on visitor numbers going up contrary to the comment you've made saying that visitor numbers will fall if we don't invest?
That's not strictly true because we have been putting in new exhibits over the past. So the last new exhibit was in 2015, which was the Siamang exhibit. But unfortunately, at the last LTP process, there were no new projects approved in the 10-year plan. And that was in part because it was expected that this master plan would be coming to council, which obviously had a whole programme of new exhibits in it.
Isn't putting people to sleep in tents overnight in cages next to tigers ludicrous?
The location of the overnight camp is actually outside of the perimeter fence of the zoo, so it's exactly the same as anyone living in the residential areas around the zoo. There is an electrified perimeter fence between that camp and the animals at the zoo.
And he doesn't need to respond about whether or not it's ludicrous or not. That's probably an opinion more than anything. I'm just saying the question about whether it's ludicrous or not is probably a rhetorical question more than a direct question, Stephen.
So, under the Healthier Rivers, which regional councils, part of this is about fencing livestock away from waterways, and yet our city has submitted to say that we should be allowed to have our animals at the zoo in our region's waterways, and it should be an exemption. But we're telling our farmers they've got to fence away. Do you see that as contradictory, or do you did you have any part in that as the zoo director?
So, the definition actually is for domestic livestock or farm stock. Zoo animals do not specifically come under that, but because there was an element of doubt, that was why we put in a submission to, well, that's why a submission's gone forward to the Regional Council. The reality is that some of our animals have to have access to water because that's their native habitat. So, for example, we have an antelope species that in the wild live in the Okavango Delta, where they swim across water, they live in water, they're actually adapted to submerge up to their nostrils in water. Similarly, we have fishing cats that their native habitat is to dabble in swamps and marshlands. We also have tapir, which their native habitat is the Amazon, and again, they spend a proportion of their time swimming in waters. So this is, you know, at the end of the day, we are putting forward what we believe is realistic for zoo animals. And as I say, they're not specifically covered under domestic or farm livestock.
So you're comfortable with our city zoo putting untreated water back into the system?
No,
that's what we submitted on.
No, of course we're not, and we would be. The master plan actually includes 2 reed bed wetland areas, which are to essentially treat that water before it leaves the zoo. We've been testing the water quality at the zoo now for 10 years, and we've been testing the water coming into the zoo and the water coming out of the zoo. And the water coming into the zoo from neighbours in one location is significantly worse than the water that leaves the zoo for Lake Rotokauri. And Lake Rotokauri have had those figures from us, and we will obviously be working with them in the future under the Healthy Rivers Plan or whatever.
Are we overcrowding in some of our pens? We've got our rhinos on dirt and reasonable numbers from... Is this natural habitat? Is this living with nature?
So obviously the master plan includes the rhino being mixed with other hoofstock from the African savanna, so it's actually looking at larger areas for them. The other thing though is that some animals in the wild would have a very poor diet, and white rhinos are one of those, and it's been found that if they're in lush pastures, big pastures in a zoo situation, that it generally impacts on their reproduction. And you quite often find that those animals that have access to very high-grade feedstuff are actually not reproducing, and therefore we wouldn't be doing our conservation plan if we were to fail to reproduce those animals.
When I was a child, I'd go to the circus and it'd have wild animals there, which they would get to perform for me and my family and whoever else was there, and that was considered to be acceptable. Later on, I've noticed that marine parks are starting to be shut down, marine life that's been kept in captivity.
So we need this to go to a question because we are getting into debate shortly, with all due respect, Mayor.
It is heading for a question. So when I was later in life, marine parks being shut down because it's not acceptable to keep large fish and mammals in enclosed enclosures. They've been released or kept until the end of their life. You've got rodeos, which are now very much frowned upon and being shut down. Animal testing is frowned upon because it's considered that we're doing something to an animal against their will. Do you consider holding animals in cages which are far smaller than their natural habitat with the justification of breeding them? Do you consider that that's acceptable in the world that we're moving into now?
I can only answer personally, and I would say yes.
What's the subsidy per person who goes to the zoo at the moment without the $15 million being spent?
So at the moment, based on 130,000 visitors, that 23.88 would be about right. The museum, for example, is 27.70 per person. So at the moment, it's less than the museum.
Does the museum hold things against their choice, though, against their will? I don't think it does. You don't need to answer that. Can I just ask? I'm not satisfied that we can guarantee the safety of the people who work in the zoo, the people who live on the other side of the fence, and the visitors to the zoo. My understanding of health and safety and the new regulations is that we're supposed to protect people even if they do something silly, even if they break the rules. We're still supposed to be in a position as council or as an employer to protect, even when they
This is a little bit outside of the scope, and,
no, it's
and
not.
we need a
This
question.
is
We do need it to go to the questions, and then I know Richard wants to respond.
This is about a $15 million spend, which we're making a decision on, and whether we should be doing it or not. It's very much within the scope of what we're talking about. So our job as employers, and our job is to check that staff are doing their job properly, even although we're not liable, but you and Richard are, is to protect our staff, protect their visitors, and protect the people outside of the zoo, even if they did something silly or broke the rules. I'm not comfortable, even with all the changes we've made, we can do that. Could I ask the Chief Executive whether he's comfortable that we've got it right?
We've put a significant amount of effort into health and safety at the zoo. We had an independent report undertaken by PricewaterhouseCoopers, which has come back through to council, and all but one recommendation, my understanding, Lance, has been actioned, and that's the cover for the chimpanzee area. Once all those items have been addressed, we will be doing a reassessment of the safety at the zoo. Health and safety in terms of wild animals is listed on our health and safety risk register. It is a significant focus point and risk area for us from a health and safety point of view. And once we have done that, all those changes, we will make an assessment. If I believe as Chief Executive that those changes haven't mitigated the risk, and it's actually a debate that came up yesterday at a fora that the SLT are involved in, is to what extent do we have to mitigate against people just doing stupid things? And the way legislation's heading, and it's becoming more politically correct, we sort of have to take that into account with our responses. If we do this work, we assess the risk, and we have to make further changes, we'll bring back that to council. At this point in time, I can't give an answer in terms of whether or not what we're doing will actually mitigate it to that extent.
When can we expect to hear back?
Well, we're still working through we have a dead timeline which we're achieving on the PwC work, and once all that work's completed, we will then be testing to see whether or not it's actually achieved the mitigations that we expected to do. So I'm saying the next 6 months is probably reasonable, Lance? Yep, next 6 months.
So will you report back to council within 6 months?
I'll report back as part of the risk assessment for elected officials undertaking their due diligence. We report back on all of the risks associated with running council, and one of those will be the risks associated with wild animals, and so we'll report it back as part of that.
Thank you.
Andrew, you finished?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thanks. Got a different series of questions here. The zoo proper, not the Waiwhakariki across the road, but is that in Hamilton City Council or Waikato District Council, or a mixture? I'm just trying to...
It's at the moment it's right on the boundary, so it's all in Waikato District Council at the present time.
Do we pay rates on the zoo to Waikato District?
We do. It's not significant, so I would imagine there's quite a discount, because it's only in the order of about 10,000 a year.
10,000 a year.
And that's including 2 residential properties.
Right, it's about 10,000 a year. I noticed that 17% of the submitters to the process, Nick, were Waikato District Council ones, and total of 30% non-Hamilton residents. But you haven't split down their support or otherwise for the different rating possibilities versus Hamilton ones, which I would have been quite interested in. Do you have that breakdown?
It is not on hand in this report, but it can be provided. We've got all of the the data for that. So, but it's not as part of this report here. I haven't broken down the different age groups or location.
Have we ever approached Waikato District or any of the other councils around Hamilton for funding support for the zoo?
Not up until now, no.
Okay. Would it not be a reasonable first cut, in your opinion, Stephen, to at least ask them to waive the rates as a contribution to their residents visiting the zoo?
Like I say, I suspect most of the rates we pay is actually for the 2 residences, but yeah, it would certainly be reasonable. When I was at Auckland Zoo, we did have regional funding of the zoo, in that every council contributed a certain amount, which we had to get every year. And
Quick, Martin's getting excited here. Hang on. Just what?
So this was obviously before the amalgamation, but even then we were getting contributions from all of the councils in the Auckland region.
And WRC are coming next week to talk about their LTP.
That's the regional council. I'm talking about district council. Yeah, but that's a good idea too. Let's go them both. Nick, do you have any sense of what the response for the ratings possible suggestions were from the non-Hamilton residents? Were they similar to Hamilton, just off the top of your head?
There were nearly 200 submissions, so I don't have that off the top of my head, but I do know that across, especially across the different household situations, it was also with age groups as well, it was pretty clear that there was a support for a mixture of funding. So that's, there were certainly some that were more appealing than others, but even looking at the general rates and targeted rates, there was still a majority of support. As for breaking down those supporters, which I recall for some of the ones outside the district, I would need to actually go back to the original spreadsheet for that.
It could be quite a good exercise, could it not, to do that, to give ourselves some ammunition when we go to either the region or the district for wider funding support for the zoo?
Yes, and in that situation it can be absolutely provided.
Yep. So a question maybe to the Chief Executive, have we put the zoo, or could we put the zoo on the regional funding possibilities list that I can't remember the other things that were on it, but there's been, Founders Theatre was one that we were going to discuss with them.
Yep, so items that are new have been placed on it, so they're discussing new items for the city, or for the region, so historical funding for the zoo hasn't been considered by that, but if Council approves the plan today and the additional funding, then it will be considered as part of that regional funding work program.
Okay. And would that include the capital funding as well for either new exhibits or for connection with Waiwhakariki?
Yeah, I'll make sure it does, because Blair Bocot's our representative on that work, and I'll just feed it into Blair to make sure he brings it up at the next meeting.
Yeah. I have detected, this is another question to Stephen, that there's a bit along the lines of what the Mayor was talking about, there is somewhat of a move, at least in some zoos, to greater proportion of exhibits being of the local flora and fauna, mainly fauna probably. Are we moving proportionally in the same direction? Because the news that I've seen over the last 10 years has all been about getting more cougars and whatnots from overseas in. But what about the New Zealand native?
Like moas and things?
Yeah. Maybe the moa restoration project, has that started yet?
So we already have over 30% of our species are native fauna. And we envisage that would at least stay at that 30-35% level. Obviously, the greater the link with Waiwhakareke, then, we would expect that we would be breeding some species to help populate that. So it may well be that there's more behind-the-scenes breeding areas for native fauna.
I hope it's behind the scenes. Might be a bit unseemly if it was front of house.
But it's worth saying that at the end of the day, overseas people have a greater interest in our native fauna than necessarily local people. And for local people to be interested in a zoo, they do want to see animals from overseas as well. So I think it is very much about having that balance. I think we've got a reasonable balance there already. And I, like I say, I would envisage that over time there would be more behind the scenes areas for native fauna than we have at the present, so that we can be assisting with reintroduction programs, etc.
But you're not, that's not part of the strategy to do that. That's just your personal view.
So the master plan obviously still features the large walk-through aviary that we have at the zoo that is purely native fauna, native birds. And that is the largest walk-through aviary in New Zealand. There's only one other in Australasia that's that equivalent size. So we already have a focus on native fauna. Probably the area that we lack is kiwi. But having said that, nocturnal houses are variable in their success rate. And if we went for kiwi in the future, we would prefer to have behind the scenes breeding populations, which we could then still do evening tours or whatever for, but rather than building a substantial nocturnal house at great expense with variable results, it would be better to be contributing to the breeding program for that species, reintroducing them to the wild, and still having a specialist visitor experience, so something like our animal encounters at the moment, where a unique group of people get the opportunity to do that.
Thanks.
Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. Stephen, you know what are the entrance fees to the...
So at the moment it's $23 for an adult, $60 for a family, and $66 for a family.
So kids don't. Sorry, when you say
and kids is you've got me.
That's right.
It's just under. It's just around half the adult price anyway.
Okay.
It's
so at the moment, an adult going to the zoo would pay $23, plus the ratepayer on their behalf would pay roughly another $23.
Yeah, approximately.
Okay. You talked about it in terms of being a business. How much revenue do you think will derive from the additional expenditure?
So
is there any sort of business plan that's been done?
We're starting work on that, and obviously I've done a little bit for the AMP, but to be quite honest, without any clear direction as to where we're going, it would be a bit of a waste of time to be putting a lot of effort into that. I think from memory we worked out that based on fairly conservative increases in patronage, nothing like the Auckland Zoo increases that I've talked about, increases in additional revenue through a different shop, different cafe, overnight stays, we would be looking for the and don't forget, there's also consequential OPEX as well, so you've got to take that into it. So I think we were covering the consequential OPEX and the depreciation by 33, 34 if we started the main programme in year 11.
Okay, thank you. You said, just quoting, I think you said you were passionate about the zoos and that sort of stuff, which is exactly what we want for a guy doing that job. You appreciate that your passion for zoos comes up against other people's passion for keeping rates affordability. So having said that you're passionate about it, and Andrew said bias, but I'm not sure that. Where do you put in terms of the Local Government Act, in terms of the ranking of the things we have to do? Where do zoos rank?
Well, I think at the end of the day they've got social benefits, and that's what I did try to put over in my introduction. Look, I mean, at the end of the day,
Could I just jump in here? I know it may well be relevant partially for this conversation, but it's more relevant for the business we're in conversation coming up in July. we're going to specifically talking about all our activities that we do for council, including the legislative context for providing those services as well. So if I can
Still be interesting to hear his answer here.
Yeah, but it's effectively work that Stephen hasn't been directly involved. Well, he was involved previously, but other staff have picked it up since. So it's probably unfair to be putting Stephen on that spot.
He was going to give it a go.
Oh, you can give it a go. I'm just saying there's a bit of context.
Have
for
a shot, mate. You can't go too wrong.
Remind me of the question now, because
I guess it's about ranking expenditure, and the zoo's not going to make a profit, so it's never going to be a net rates reducer. It's always going to be a net rates increaser. At what stage is the net rate increase too much?
Isn't that a political decision, Councillor Mallett, to put staff
Yeah, of course
on?
it is. Of course it is. But that's exactly why we ask for advice from staff. Goodness me, this is a simple thing.
But you can't put him in the position of making a
Why
value
not?
judgment on that, which
He
we
can
will
make
do
any
as
judgment he
Richard
likes.
has
He's told us
pointed
he's
out in the
passionate about the
LTP.
zoo and all that sort of carry on, so we've heard all that.
I can't give you a direct answer on that, but I can tell you of my experience at Auckland Zoo. And yes, we have phenomenal growth. But at the
zoo had phenomenal growth, and that was reflected in revenue growth as well.
By the time I left Auckland Zoo, 90% of the costs were covered by revenue. So I'm not, look, that's an extreme example, but certainly we can't. There are some cases of zoos worldwide that certainly do break even or make a small profit.
Okay.
It's not generally something that makes a profit because of the public good, because of the benefits to conservation, etc.
Okay. So at the moment, I think roughly it's about 50-50, is it? About half our costs are covered by the revenue and the other half is funded by the ratepayer?
It's closer to that at the moment, but it's going to be going to 33% because of the extra costs of the health and safety, etc.
Which are not factored into these?
No, those are factored into future costs. Yes.
Okay, so when you answered James's question, you were talking about costs that didn't fully include the additional costs from the safety.
Sorry, I know where the confusion is here, because even though it's $23 for an adult, that isn't the revenue that we get from every single person.
Oh, okay.
So if you actually divide the overall revenue by 130,000 visitors, you're clearly it's clearly not going to be $23
because there's kids
head.
in there and there's family groups
kids,
and that sort of stuff.
There's family groups, there's annual passes, there's a whole range of different prices in that structure.
So the most you get from a individual is $23 per visit, and there's a lot of reasons that averages down.
That's correct.
Okay.
And ideally, we would be increasing the number of annual passes, for example, where you are getting substantial returns. And at the end of the day, once they've visited 4 times, it's good value for the customer. But
it's certainly
the average person generally wouldn't go 4 times a year. So there's that's obviously a clear benefit to the zoo.
Okay. So 130,000 or 125,000 to 130,000 visits. Our population's 150 or something, is it? 165. Okay. So clearly, is it primarily repeat stuff? Is it sort of are people going out there once a year? Do you know?
My pick, and I can't say that's fully based on analysis, would be on average it's once every year to 2 years.
But that, I guess my question is not. There's a whole lot of people have never been to the zoo. So it's like all of our facilities. Some people swim, some people never swim. Some people go to libraries, some people never go to libraries.
So I can say that from our visitor surveys, and it's been pretty consistent over the years. About 40% of our visitors are Hamilton City Council residents. So that would give you a scale for how many are actually from the city.
Okay.
And about 25% is from the Greater Waikato. And we only have about 9% international visitors. And obviously the rest are from the New Zealand as a whole. So we do get quite a lot, for example, from South Auckland.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bunting?
Thank you. I'll try you with a similar question I was asking the Friends of the Zoo earlier on. Can you just explain to me, like, we don't just buy an animal, put it in a cage and say, here, come and look at the pretty rhinos, do we? Can you explain the fluidity of how they move around and the place the zoo plays in the conservation movements around the world?
Okay, so I can't say we never buy an animal because there are some animals that are only available in New Zealand in the private sector. But anything that's maintained in a zoo or anything that's for conservation purposes, none of those animals have a price tag attached. We just don't put a value on that animal. However, the arrangement, and so we're in what I would call cooperative breeding programs, which are managed by the Regional Zoo Association. And those are managed by volunteer coordinators that are spread out throughout all of the zoos in Australasia. So we have, for example, the coordinator for the White Rhino program, and that's for the whole of Australasia. And that program, essentially, the animals, when they're at your zoo, at Hamilton Zoo, are owned by the zoo, but and that's for the purposes of managing that animal, the cost of the animal, etc. But that if the coordinator identifies that we have to ship a rhino up to Auckland Zoo, we would just pass that off to Auckland Zoo, and they would pay the transport costs to get it there.
I guess what I was trying to get, rather than the cost of it all and the mechanics of it all, was what's the role for, like, for example, in some species that may have gone extinct, had this sort of movement not been happening?
Yeah, so I mean, there are examples of golden lion tamarin, which has been reintroduced into Brazil as a result of breeding programs in zoos and the like. The American bison, for a period of time, went down to very few animals that were maintained purely in a captive state on ranches or zoos or whatever. There are, I mean, the Californian condor was completely removed from the wild and has been reintroduced in recent years as a result of breeding in 2 or 3 high-profile zoos in America. There are a long list of the, and as I said, Hamilton Zoo itself, 500 brown teal have gone back into the wild, bred at the zoo specifically for that reason. We might send the odd bird off to other collections for that program, but at the end of the day, all of the progeny are ultimately going back into the wild, and even the adults ultimately go back into the wild, and we just keep breeding from younger birds.
So Mayor Andrew was talking about when he was growing up as a kid, he went and saw unhappy animals in cages, and I guess we're talking about the likes of the Tea Party chimps and the likes. What's changed, for example, in the primates between the Tea Party chimps of Auckland Zoo, and in fact you still got one that was there, haven't you?
I don't have anything at Auckland Zoo, but
one of ours was a Tea Party chimp, wasn't it?
One of ours was the daughter of a Tea Party chimp. So yes, we don't do that anymore, admittedly. And to be quite honest, I've never worked for a zoo that's actually had Tea Party chimps or the like. So I don't have a lot of direct experience on that. My grounding was in conservation zoos like Jersey Zoo, etc. But look, at the end of the day, what I can say is that the aim ultimately is to have as natural an environment as possible. Clearly, you've also got to take into account the husbandry of the animals and what benefits them and what doesn't. And yes, at the end of the day, you're not going to have an elephant that roams hundreds of miles, because that's not the case. But in a situation where they are fed, they get their social environment within their animal groups, they get veterinary care. The reality is that a lot of these animals are living longer than they would in the wild. It's a tough world out there for those animals in the wild. And to be quite frank, zoo animals, we actually have a problem the other end of the spectrum. We get them where they age and start getting ailments like arthritis and things, and then the question is, when do you put them down, put them to sleep? Because clearly you don't want the animal to be suffering. And that's the challenge, is frequently, actually knowing when to stop for the animal's benefit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We've got one more person for questions, and then I'll just alert you to the fact we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back straight after lunch and get to Councillor O'Leary's notice of motion and into the discussion.
Just dispose of the debate part, because we do have some members of the public that have been waiting for this item, and I guess with the debate we can only all speak once, so
I guess well, I'm in your hands. That's probably going to take us another half an hour, but if you're happy to hold off on eating for another half an hour, 40 minutes, we can do it that way. Councillor Henry, you're the last of the questions.
Thank you. I do remember the zoo in Munich many years ago. There was one concrete jungle, and I'm grateful that the zoos have changed dramatically and really a lot more with nature. There's just a couple of questions I have got. With the animals in the zoo, they usually come from zoos, so they have actually grown up in captivity mainly. They don't quite often come from the wild. Is that right, or have I got that wrong? I mean, they're already used to that kind of environment in some form.
The vast majority of our animals are bred in zoos and come from zoos. I mean, I'll go back to my example of the brown teal. Clearly, we're bringing in birds from the wild for that programme. So the way that works is you bring in eggs or ducklings. Okay. They grow up in a zoo environment, even though they weren't originally bred in that zoo environment. Those then go on to produce ducklings that are going back into the wild. And as I said, ultimately, the adults go back and more ducklings or eggs are brought in to start the next phase. So there's a number of reasons for that. One is that you don't want the animals to become domesticated in that case. And the other one is that you're maximising the genetics of the population by doing it that way. But yes, the short answer is most of the animals are actually born and bred in captivity.
Okay, they don't know any different. Thank you. And the other one is just an approximate number. I mean, how many visitors would we need in the Hamilton Zoo to cover the cost? Sort of an approximate.
I mean, it's.
I know it's a hard one
I know.
But, yeah.
I think I said earlier on that 250,000 is. My experience with a number of zoos in the UK, those zoos that were getting 250,000 visitors a year were sustainable. Okay. To be quite honest, that's what we should be aiming for.
Right.
And the risk of going for bigger numbers, which of course is feasible, is that you start to lose the experience that you've got there.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor O'Leary, got a notice of motion.
A motion.
Motion, thank you. Is it up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, this plan's been a really long journey in the making. Oh, sorry.
Well, that's what
I'm not apologising.
Yeah, it's coming.
Oh, there you go. It's a staff recommendation just with D, which is just to thank the external members, because it's been 3 years since we've touched base with them, so that was all. It's exactly the same, except for D, which is to that the CE just write and thank the external members of the group, because as I said, it's been 3 years since they've been involved.
Okay, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do you have a seconder?
What the amendment is yet. So it's option 1.
A seconder first. Hang on, let's just clarify process first, please.
So he can indicate what he wishes to put forward. To be an amendment, he needs a seconder.
Okay, so he has a seconder now. Right. But you...
Hang on, well, we need to see what the amendment is. So it's option 1. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So are you want us to speak to the motion and the amendment?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you're speaking, identify whether you're in favour of the motion or the amendment. It will help us.
I'm sorry, 1 second. Can I just clarify for my team? So the amendment is...
They do not approve the master plan.
Do not adopt the
It's
wording under option 1.
Option 1.
it's not permittable as an amendment. By default, if this isn't approved, then the option you're proposing is in place. So happy to enter.
1 plus we go ahead and thank the team?
No, it's still a
That would be
direct-
all right, wouldn't it?
No, it's not.
Receive the report, don't adopt it, and thank the team.
Well, it's direct, what Leanne is saying.
No, that's
is
not
it's
a
direct
negative.
negative, because it has the direct
No, because
negative
we're
intent.
agreeing with thanking the team, which is D. So
No, but
D
the-
would go in. It's not a direct negative.
I accept the advice of the Democratic Services.
Well,
They have
point
said
of-
it's direct negative.
Point of order.
Yes.
Through you, can I ask the governance manager to assist the movers of the amendment? Because my understanding, what you can put up there is a notice of further motion should the original motion be unsuccessful, because obviously they're talking about thanking the team. They're talking about it as, I mean, this is quite interesting because you have a right to consider a master plan, which we're doing today, but their response to the consideration of the master plan is they're not going to proceed with it. And it just seems to me a really fine balance procedurally, because obviously it just is important for the will of the council to not to be unduly unfettered through a standing order. I wonder, governance manager, could you assist the move of the amendment of a way forward so that they at least there's a clear alternative that is open?
Yes, I can. So the standing orders do not permit a direct negative, and we've had other, this has been raised in the context of other motions that have been put forward in different meetings, so it's supported both by standing orders and by precedent. The options are, of course, if, for example, elected members did wish to thank people on the committee but did not wish to approve, to take the motion in parts, which we do on regular occasions as well. Alternatively, if there is an amendment that is not a direct negative of the motion on the table, I'm happy to help the mover and the seconder craft appropriate wording. But by default, Deputy Mayor, to your points, the motion is asking elected members to consider whether or not to approve. So the possibility of not approving the motion is already on the table. And that is why it would not be inappropriate to have an amendment that is a direct negative to the framing that's there.
So I understand the orders. We've got a staff report that's come up with two options that we're not allowed to debate.
I think what Leanne is
Because
saying
what you're saying is, by putting them both up, you can debate both points.
So what Leanne is saying is if Angela's motion is lost, that is how you do it. You'd vote against it, and if it's lost, then there's an opportunity to put a new motion. Well, I mean, actually, no, if it's lost, it exercises the same intent.
Yeah, but my point is you've got a staff report that's given us an option that we,
And the option,
normally we would debate the two options together. In this case, you're not allowing us to. It's unusual. I haven't seen this before.
No, through what you can do is, in terms of the comments that the governance manager made, is that it is a direct negative option one. However, you can still debate your support for option one in terms of the debate against this recommendation that's gone forward. There's nothing precluding you from suggesting that you don't want to support a zoo master plan, which is option one within the report. So you can still have that debate. Just when it comes to the vote, to effectively, because the way option one isn't really an option, it should basically it's either option to progress or not progress really. So in this case, voting this down, debating the fact you don't want a zoo master plan, effectively achieves the outcomes of option one as per the report.
Yeah. So simply put, if you,
Thank you.
don't agree with the motion that Angela has up at the moment, then you speak against it, which is just the same as speaking for the direct opposite. So, I mean, you still have your democratic right to speak absolutely in favour of your preferred option, but we're voting on this option. Does it make sense? Everybody else make sense to everyone? Right, well anyway, we're going to we've had a ruling and I accept that, so we're going to go on with Angela's statement, her debate as the mover.
So just before you start, I don't want to interrupt you, so once this is voted, it's finished, we can't go back to it. So can we put forward a notice of motion, should this fail?
Without understanding exactly what you want to do, Mary Andrew, it's always an option to put forward a notice of motion, bearing in mind that that wouldn't be heard at this meeting. Alternatively, you may foreshadow, before you've concluded your debating comments, a further motion should this motion be lost. That motion can still not be a direct, cannot be a revisiting of the motion on the table.
Ironic, given I'm a seconder and a very proud seconder of Councillor Leary's motion, trying to be assist. Look, this is a really interesting parliamentary procedure. It's about issues of lying on the table. At any time, a governance body has the total authority to do what it wants, and it's very simple. That if I was moving an amendment, I would just say A. And then I would put that it just lie on the table. It not be no further action be taken at this time, and that the task force be thanked. But it seems to me very clearly, if, for example, the motion that I'm seconding is unsuccessful, of course, the council has every right. This committee has every right to say that we take no further action at this time. I would have thought. It just seems to me we're getting very. I mean, maybe we have to review our standing orders because we need to get to an outcome.
I think we're actually violently in agreement, Deputy Mayor. Actually, it's quite clear. In the event that this motion fails, that's the end of the matter unless an alternative.
That's not right, because councillors should have the right within this debate to put a variation on things as well. It's not just a matter of voting. People would need to know that variation in order to decide how they would vote. And normally you might be right, but in this case staff have specifically put option 1 in here as an alternative to option 2. And I think it would be wrong for us to rule out the amendment when you've got this in there. That would be unheard of, in my opinion. If staff hadn't put it in as an amendment, it would still obvious the status quo would be an option, and that would be could be listed as a direct negative here. It's
so the standing orders are quite clear, and Leanne's 100% right in that respect. The democratic right to debate is still here. You can speak very strongly against option 2 if you like, and in so doing, hang on, let me finish.
Well, I hadn't finished when you interrupted me.
Let me finish that. And in so doing, you can speak strongly for option 1. The thing is that option 1 cannot be put up as an amendment.
When you interrupted me, I was talking about a variation.
Yes, so Martin mentioned the potential of something quite different being put up, like it lie on the table, and that's quite a different matter, right, Leanne?
That's a procedural motion which has to be heard first.
It hasn't happened yet, though, Dave.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't give advice on a matter that's not in front of me yet.
Okay, so we're ready to proceed?
Can I
move?
I think we need to.
I just want to suggest, if the amendment was A and D, would that, which is, I think, Andrew's intent. So if the amendment was A and D, would that? So we don't approve the master plan and we don't note any stuff about the thing. Would that be considered a direct negative too? Would it?
No.
But and Andrew, would that would achieve what you and I are wishing to achieve? I think.
A and D, you're fine.
It doesn't stop the plan though. It lays it on the table.
It's laying on the table.
So it might come up again through LT plan.
Sure. As anything could happen. Yeah, I mean anything could get defeated, and then if you get the right numbers, it can be brought up again. Yeah.
Okay, so does that answer your concern, Mayor Andrew, that your amendment would just be A and D, and that's all, with the rest removed?
Then he'd be put in a position of.
Yes. What's it? Yeah.
Trying to achieve an outcome.
So I wasn't going to take a break because we had hoped to not keep people in the public waiting. But personally, I think it might be beneficial to take a sort of cooling of the heels and a clarity of information around this. And otherwise it's going to go back and forth. So I think we are now going to adjourn until 1:45. And my apologies for the public. I hope that you can grab a bite and come back, but I think we've got to do this properly. We're adjourned 1:45. Is that okay? Yeah, lunch.